Hi everyone and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Today we are looking at the massive subject of magic in the world of ice and fire. But before we get into that, what I always try to do just at the start of all of these live streams is just give a little flavor of a few of the things going on out there, TV shows to look forward to, that kind of thing. There are two or three things just to quickly bring to your attention this week. The first of all is we've had what is apparently going to be the last bit of casting news for Lord of the Rings TV show. Four more names. I didn't recognize any of them, I'm afraid. Do go and check them out. But I think what's the takeaway from this is going to be a big cast. This is now, I believe, 39 names that we've had announced for this. So expect this to be like something like Game of Thrones with a massive ensemble cast. That's the feel we're going to have here. This is not just going to be two or three main characters. This is going to be huge and huge and expansive. So that I think is good news, leaving absolutely everything else aside. And just as a sort of a sit rep on that, I'm still expecting it early next year. They haven't quite finished filming season one. They're nearly there. They've got a few pickups to do. One actor did leave, so they just need to refilm a few scenes. As I understand it, that's going to be next month. This month, we're in July now. Later this month that they're planning on finishing that up. So early 2022. My most exciting moment of this week came when I discovered Good Omens 2 is happening, the TV show. For those who saw it, Good Omens, the TV show, was wonderful. If you're fans of the book by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, which is a wonderful book I've loved for many years, and it was adapted a couple of years ago now, I think, and wonderful lead performances from David Tennant and Michael Sheen, that really captured the heart of the story, and I and many other people thought that was it. But Neil Gaiman has now told us a bit of backstory that it's new to me. Maybe others have been aware of it, but a long time ago, when both he and Terry Pratchett were not as well known as they are now, they were over in I think it was Atlanta, attending a con, and they were sharing a room. They were promoting Good Omens, the book that they'd written together. And one night, Terry Pratchett was suffering from jet lag. Neil Gaiman had just returned from a big night out, and they spent the night plotting out a sequel to Good Omens. And they never got around to writing it because both of their careers took off, and they just never found the time. So this is going to be Neil Gaiman as returning as co-showrunner, co-writer. Tennant and Sheen are both returning. So we are going to see the plot idea that Gaiman and Pratchett came up with all those years ago, and I'm very excited about this. So it's only just been announced, so don't expect to see it for at least a year, probably more, but that is very exciting. The other thing just to bring to your attention, I think, is WitcherCon. This is one of the many online conventions that we're having this year, and this is all about the world of The Witcher. This is the official one, covering both the Witcher TV show and the Witcher games. Now, if you go to my Twitter, you'll find me in Deep Geek over on Twitter. I've retweeted the sort of the running order of the things that they're going to go through. What I'm particularly looking out for is possibly a trailer for Nightmare of the Wolf, which is the spin-off anime, the origin story of Vesemir. Now, we're told that that's going to happen in 2021. We know they've been making it for some time. We even now have a running time, 81 minutes, and a sort of a slot on the Netflix webpage. So it may well come out quite soon. So keep an eye out for that. They have promised us some surprises, which is normally their way of saying there may be a trailer or two. So that's what's happening out in the big wide world of fantasy TV shows. Lots to look forward to, I think. A couple of super chats just before we went on air. Mara Lee, hi there, Mara. Great to see you in the chat today, saying, for gorgeous Dan of House in Deep Geek, feel better soon. Yeah, unfortunately, my dog Dan, not too well at the moment, had to have a little operation this week, so he's just sleeping it off upstairs. But thank you very much. It's very kind. We also had what have we had? I think I got another super chat from, if I can find it, Lyle Hammock. Thank you, that's very generous, saying, I agree with you that undoing the magic which made them is how the others will be stopped. Considering this magic also, I believe, affected the seasons, will this create a cascade effect which will lead to magic leaving the world? Thank you for all you do. Okay, well, great opening question. So, in terms of, for those who aren't aware of this working theory that I have, which is that the way that the threat of the others is going to be ended is not by a big battle, and therefore whoever's got the strongest army wins. That does not seem to be George R. R. Martin's style, but undoing the magic that created the others or brought about the others, however it is. Now, and I think that's what they were trying to show on the TV show. You can decide for yourself how successful that was. But I think this is roughly where we're going with the books. Undoing whatever magic it was there to bring about the others. The back page of the very first edition of Book 1, A Game of Thrones, talked about a preternatural magical event which put the seasons out of balance. So it's not too much of an assumption, I think, to think that whatever it was that brought about the others was this event which set the seasons out of kilter. So you undo that, the others are dealt with in some way, the seasons are returned to normal in some way. Yes, we're hazing on the details because we simply haven't been given enough information in the books about the others. But if that all happens, does that mean magic itself is rolled back? Magic itself disappears? I think the answer is no, because if we follow that train of logic down to its logical conclusion, the thing which created that in the first place was magic. So magic existed beforehand, magic will exist afterwards. But what we're going to do today is try and unpick what that means, because yes, I've often said magic seems to operate on the same principles, but there are sort of different types of magic, some which seem more natural, some which seem more learned in a way. So that's part of what we're going to be unpicking today. But as a short answer, no, I think at the end of all of this, we will still have a magical world. Glenn Thrasher with a super sticker, just saying thank you. Thank you, Glenn. I hugely appreciate that. J. Kelsey 55 saying, is the European Soccer Championship coming home? Brackets, yes. Yes, it is. Mara Lee saying thank you again, Mara. I appreciate that for that super sticker. And Bettina Nielsen saying, just want to say thank you for all that you do. Take care. Thank you, Bettina. I hugely appreciate that. And also Brigitte Richardson super chat. I didn't see a question attached to that. If you want to drop it into the chat, I'll try and find it. One of the moderators will try to draw it to my attention if I can't see it. Yeah, thank you very much anyway. Now, Kim Sandberg also, before we went live, said, magic, you say? Let's talk about all the magics Brynden Rivers used before he became a magic people-eating tree. Okay, so this is Bloodraven. And yes, the short answer is he seems to have been a magic user even before he got hooked up to that Weirwood network. This should not surprise us, because he is hooked up to the Weirwood network because he is a green seer. So what that brings with it is all of this, the green seer magic, the walking magic, the skin changing magic. And we do get rumors of that in Duncan Egg. We get rumors of it that he could change into a wolf, that he had birds spying for him, he could see through the eyes of different things. So that certainly seemed to be what the rumors were based on. A lot of this skin changing was going on. But he did other kinds of magic as well. There are a lot of hints in the Duncan Egg stories, that the Mystery Knight, that he glamoured himself to appear as someone else. So he used magic to take on the appearance of somebody else. That was definitely there. He also talks, when he talks to Duncan Egg, he talks very knowledgeably about, there have always been Targaryens through the ages who dream true dreams. He wasn't talking about himself specifically, but the way he said it, the context did seem to imply that he knew a lot about Targaryen magic. And this should not surprise us, because the magical inheritance he had came from both the Targaryens, because obviously he was part Targaryen, and we might expect the Targaryen magic to be there, but also he was half Blackwood. His mother was a Blackwood. The Blackwoods, very strong followers of the old gods, the old religion, and therefore First Men, we would expect them to be having the magic of the First Men about them. So he seems to have been the place, the nexus for where all that magic came together. So yes, he was a powerful magic user even before he went north of the wall and got hooked up to the Weirwood network. Question from username redacted, saying, why do the maesters not want magic in the world they're building, or teach that it isn't viable? Surely if they knew and could use magic, it would be easier for them to extend their own control. Yes, so this is also a question. Mara Lee, you also asked over on Patreon, why do you think the maesters feel that all magic faded away with the doom of Valyria? Are they just too stubborn to see that there is still magic practiced? So what is the Maester's stance towards magic? Well, they certainly teach new Maesters to believe that magic does not work. The way that they do that, one of the sort of induction ceremonies in order to become a Maester is you have to spend a night in a room with some glass candles, and the idea is to try and make them work, glass candles being magical. And the whole point of that is that you can't make them work, because until very recently glass candles were not working the world over. So they very, very clearly and very, very strongly wanted to be sending out across Westeros people who believed that magic was not real, magic does not work. Once Maester Luwin sort of says to Bran, it may once have worked, it may have existed, but now it does not. So I think the first thing to say about the Maesters is that their agenda is to make people believe that magic does not exist. The second thing is to say that, of course, they understand that magic did exist, and they also surely understand that magic does exist in certain places and with certain people. Some of the Maesters, Marwyn, for example, definitely believe in all of that. But there are some Maester, but the Maester position as a whole is to understand it does sort of exist. For example, they use Valyrian steel as one of the links. They're sort of the, when you study the higher mysteries magic, effectively, you get a Valyrian steel link in your chain that we are told you have to know the spells to use to actually forge, reforge Valyrian steel. So they have to, at the very least, use that kind of minor magic that they've got going on there. And they're not blind. I think that they understand that there is magic out there. They just want to build a world that doesn't have magic, that is a world of science and rationality. And that, I think, is the heart of where they are at, because their power comes from scientific research and rationality, not magic, not things that they can't control and contain, not things that seem to operate outside the laws of the universe that they have been very happily categorizing all this time. So that is where they're at. They have an outward policy position. Inside, it's slightly more nuanced. You're saying, wouldn't it be easier if they used magic, could extend their own control? I don't think so, because there are so many unknowns with magic, and people can, all sorts of people can be using it. Okay, we've got a question from Colin Carroll. Did the Valyrians control the dragons with their minds? Only just found out you did live streams, so I'm having to binge them from when you started. From when I started this a long time ago. Well, good luck with that. Many, many hours ahead of you. But welcome, I should say. Did the Valyrians control the dragons with their minds? No. There will have been an element of that. I have no doubt. There does seem to exist a bond, as we know, between the dragon rider and their dragon that seems to allow them to know where each other are and that kind of thing. But there is more to it. Whereas Dany just seems to climb on top of Drogon and fly him, where we see in sort of Fire and Blood just random hints about chains and saddles and things like that. So they had methods of helping them stay on dragons and guiding them. And crucially, also, there are magical horns that they used. Dany suddenly remembers this when she's out in the Dothraki Sea. The very last chapter we have, she goes, "Oh, it's terrible how I can't control Drogon as well as I want to." The old Valyrians, they used to have magical horns that could control their dragons. So that seems to be how they used to do it. And obviously, as we know, there is, heading towards the Slaver's Bay at this very minute, Victarion with a magical horn that apparently can control dragons. So that's all tying in together. That's going to end up, I suspect, with Dany, and Dany is going to be able to use it to help her control Drogon. So did they with their minds? No, they had a connection with their minds, but the actual control was through other means. Dr. Mrs. the Monarch, good name. Valyrian steel should be able to be made again. Magic is back, and so are dragons. The knowledge has to be somewhere. So theoretically, yes, it should be able to be made again. I would agree. The issue is the knowledge. Now, when we get Tobbo Mott, who is the only person in Westeros, it would appear, who knows the magical spells that are required in order to reforge Valyrian steel. He comes from Qohor, which is a very magical place. If the knowledge of it has survived anywhere over in Essos, then that is where it has survived, up there. That's where he came from, but it appears that they do not have the knowledge of how to create new Valyrian steel. Hundreds of years have passed now, 400 years since the Doom of Valyria. No one has created new Valyrian steel. So it appears that no one knows how to. Whether it needs the sort of the ambient level of magic to be greater, it's not 100% clear. I'll talk about that ambient level of magic, I'm sure, a little bit later. The other place that may have the information is the Citadel, not just because they've got lots of ancient books, but because we know that they went over to Valyria before the Doom. Lots of maesters went over there, gathered lots of information, and then went back. So if anyone has that knowledge, and they certainly have the knowledge to reforge it, if anyone has that knowledge, they do. So I think the theory is definitely right. I would agree that you should be able to make it. But in terms of the knowledge, whoever has got the knowledge doesn't seem to be using it at the moment for whatever reason. It may be like with the maesters, who they just do not wish to, but it may be just in Cohor, it's just being passed down because, hey, it keeps the price of Valyrian steel high, and if you want that high, maybe maybe you do not wish to be creating any more. AJ Borkar, how many Valyrian steel links do the Citadel have on site? We simply do not know. The assumption is that they've got a lump of it somewhere back there, that they're just, I mean, a link is only quite small. The chains in the books, the chains aren't those huge. We saw them on the show, these massive chains. That they tend to be quite tight around the collar, so the chain is actually relatively small. Kevin, thank you, very generous super chat, thank you, saying sorry, not on topic. Okay, taking a break from George R.R. Martin before Winds of Winter, and so redoing King's works. Do you think George R.R. Martin borrows a lot from him, and in what ways? I assume you mean Stephen King, and in what ways? How do you think the usage of the spiritual unknown plays into the horror in both of their anthologies? Okay, so I do like Stephen King. It's been a while since I read any Stephen King, but my take is that one of the things that Stephen King does very well is he tries to, yes, he writes horror, but he tries to plant it in reality. So it's not just here's an horrific world with lots of horrific things going on. You set it in a world that you can understand, and then you add in an element of something which is wrong, sinister, supernatural in some way. And this, if you look at something like The Stand, for example, that's where that works. Similarly, The Green Mile, the kind of the magical, if that's the word we wish to use for it, elements in those stories tend to be held back. The story tends to be quite grounded, quite human, and then we get the supernatural element. That, I think, is George R.R. Martin's overall approach to A Song of Ice and Fire. He has started it out. If you ignore the prologue and the very last chapter of Book One, A Game of Thrones, you could be forgiven for thinking that there's no magic in this story. The entire Book One, with the exception of those bookends, is low fantasy. The characters that we're told to believe are intelligent, well-read, wise, people like Tyrion, people like Maester Luwin, they don't just say no, magic's not real. They scoff at it. Tyrion, when he's up at the wall and he's like talking about the Gunkins and all the rest of it, he's laughing at the idea that there may be some magical elements to this world, and we as a reader are also invited to laugh at it. The flashes we get with things like Bran's dreams, this is a dream for him. Again, it's not immediate. This is a magical thing happening here. We're kind of left to just sort of go, okay, so there is magic here, but it's not obvious, and the greater population does not see it. The maesters have done a good job over time. So that would be, I think, where they both inhabit this, and so that makes it feel more horrific. And this is why George R. Martin is quite a horror writer, is that he injects the supernatural into actually quite normal, grounded situations. And Fire and Blood, people remember Princess Aria returning on Balerion, that it felt so horrific because it just came out of the blue. Nobody knew, no, you weren't expecting what happened then, and suddenly, whoa, that was pretty terrible. Question from Colin Carroll. Again, thank you so much. Saying, why on earth would they ride dragons in battle? What can they do that they can't make the dragons do with the horn from the ground? Isn't this risky? Well, we don't know. We've never seen what a magical horn can do. The magical dragon controlling horn. We simply do not know. My best guess is that this can't be used in isolation. This can't just be used by a random people controlling. You have to have some bond there as well. You have to have some way of connecting with the dragon. So it's not just you can toot on the horn once to go left, toot on the horn twice to go right. That's not quite how it works. It works with the person who is bonded to the dragon, who also has to become bonded to the horn. So that is why they ride them, and it's more a matter of the dragon. If they're riding it into war, the dragon, if you imagine it like in medieval warfare, a well-trained warhorse, yes, they did what they were told. They've obeyed the reins and the stirrups and all the rest of it, but they were intelligent enough to know how to fight themselves. And that's the idea with the dragons, is that they were part controlled, but part they're just fearsome beasts of their own. Gibber Dole saying, hi Robert, when does a statue start having magic? When the remains are there, or is it something else? What is the magic based on? Love the streams. Thank you. So in terms of, I'm assuming you're talking in terms of the magic, the statues in the Winterfell crypts. Now, this is something I've been banging on about for a very long time. Every single time we see the statues, we read about them, people remember them, people dream about them, every interaction with them, they seem to be alive. George R. R. Martin writes about them as if they were alive. This isn't just like a one-off. He does this writing because it's quite cool. Every single time people feel as if the statues are staring at them. People dreamed about the statues coming to life. The statues cry. The wolf statue, direwolf statues snarl. This, every single time this happens, this is George R. R. Martin telling us that these statues in some way are alive. Now, in terms of the practicality of, and sorry, I should probably take a step back. So my working theory is that these statues, there has to be a purpose for all of this Winterfell crypts nonsense. Otherwise, it is just a little bit of interesting world building, and there's been so much there that it can't be. So we could have the Stark ghosts rising from the dead. That, I would argue, would be incredibly ineffective against the army of the dead. So the statues themselves will rise. Now, at which point do they become magical? I would argue it's the statues seem to have the spirits of the Starks inhabiting them in some way. And messages, we're told the sword is there to keep the spirits in. So the spirits are there. That has to be connected to the bones. A lot of effort is made to talk about the bones of the Starks being buried there. So the bones, when the bones get there, that's the point at which, as we learn elsewhere, as we were talking last time, something lingers, and that something that lingers is captured within the statue. That's my working theory. Perhaps we will find it, probably not in the next book, but in the last book. What is the magic based on? This, I think, is based on Children of the Forest magic. That's my take. I think that this was an agreement of, so I was about to say pact, but that would confuse it with the pact, but an agreement between the Starks and the Children of the Forest that caused the Starks to be this army that is there, this fallback. If the wall doesn't work, then the Starks are the people who are going to be protecting the lands of humans. Tony Sled saying happy Canada Day. Is it Canada Day? If so, happy Canada Day to all Canadians out there. Let's go to a couple of questions from my patrons. The Greasy Strangler saying, hi Robert, my question is around whether you think krakens are real. Krakens, and we will see them in the Winds of Winter. Also, are you looking forward to Saturday's football game? Is it coming home? It's not a football stream, so I'm not going to get into this in detail, but it is, as you so eloquently say, coming home. Now, in terms of krakens, are they real? Yes, I think there are. They are. There is no reason to think that in a magical world, then magical beasts do not exist. We know manticores exist. We know dragons exist. We know the others exist. Children of the Forest exist. Why not krakens? There's absolutely no reason why not. We've got multiple sightings of them throughout Fire and Blood. George R. R. Martin, almost as if he's reminding us of them, and he's reminding us that they appear when there is blood in the water. Think of them as being like sharks. So that is the kind of the image that we've got going on. Do they exist? Yes. Will they make an appearance if there is enough blood going on in the water? Is there going to be a massive sea battle just off of the coast of Westeros? Yes. Euron is creating a huge sea battle against the combined forces of the Red Wine Fleet and the High Towers. We will see krakens there. I'm absolutely convinced of it. So this does allow me to go into just the clarification about, I started about talking at the very top of the show about sort of different kinds of magic, and there are different fields. There is magic that you do, and there is just things that exist within a magical world. And I would categorize these things as slightly different. So there are magical creatures in this magical world. We could think of them as not being magical or special. They just are. That's just what they are like. Krakens exist because lots of other things exist. We have not seen lots of these magical creatures, and we do not know which of these magical creatures do actually exist. We hear about unicorns. They're probably just one-horned goats on the island of Skagos. We hear about mer people. We haven't seen any evidence of them yet. Krakens, we get a lot of eyewitness reports, so probably do exist. Carl Karsnark saying, Mel talks about waking stone dragons a lot as well. Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the key things about Azor Ahai Reborn. What if Jon Snow is the person who blows the horn of winter, raises the stone statues? Does that provide evidence that he's Azor Ahai Reborn? Certainly in Melisandre's eyes, it will. Question from Evan Power. I am rereading and have questions regarding your Winterfell statues theory. Excellent. They are described as having direwolves at their feet. Will they rise too? I think probably yes. They are described as being Well, two reasons. Firstly, they are also described in this way every time someone goes down there as snarling and moving and following people. So again, George R. R. Martin is anthropomorphizing them in some way. He's making them feel, if not human, then alive in some way. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I think it's just too cool. I think George R. R. Martin will not be able to resist the idea of having these. If he's got the statue with a direwolf there, then I think the direwolves will. And we know that there is a habit, from the limited evidence that we have, there is a habit that the Starks would send direwolf bones back. Ned sent Lady Sansa's direwolf's bones back up to Winterfell to be buried up there. That's not just like with a person. 4 guards went up. So this was clearly an important thing that he considered, getting the bones of a direwolf back up. Question from Reflective Rambling, saying, I issue a challenge, sir. Find a way to make it a football stream. Say development of sporting look like in Planetos. Surely an early version could exist, perhaps west of Westeros. I'm going to resist that this time, but I would refer you on to the world of Raymond E. Feist. When I was younger, I read all the way through his epic 30-something volume series that started with Magician. Really good fun. He's a great storyteller, some fantastic characters. And as part of that, they did indeed invent football in a fantasy world. So I would recommend that. And Terry Pratchett did the same in Discworld. Roman Lakovets, thank you very much, saying Liam Cunningham. This is the actor who played Davos Seaworth. Once said that according to George R. R. Martin, Melisandre is over 200 years old. The show also hinted at this. If true, do you think it's just a fun tidbit, or could it be significant in some way? I think it's probably a bit of both. The fact that she is old and doesn't look it does show that she is powerful. There is, however, and I did a video on this ages ago, there is a reasonable amount of evidence that she's more than just very old and keeping herself alive, but she herself is some kind of fire white in some way. The reason is that she doesn't, when you compare what she has as her experience, we've now had one POV chapter from her perspective. If you compare her experience to that of, say, Beric Dondarrion, they seem quite similar. She doesn't sleep much at all. She doesn't eat, really, except to sort of eat in front of other people to make them feel better. She doesn't need it. So where's she getting her energy from? She has this kind of supernatural warmth to her that doesn't seem to be affected by the cold at the wall. There's something going on about her that is more than just, here's a magic user. There is more evidence there. Do go and check that video out if you're interested. So yes, I think it is an interesting tip. It is an interesting little take to make a different character, but I don't have no idea if this is where you are going to with that question. I don't think this means that she is specifically an other person, and we have to go back 200 years to find out who that other person is. I think it's reasonably obvious from what we know that she was a child sold into slavery who then got taken to a Red Temple, where priest R'hllor temple, and then was brought up in there and learned the magic that way. So yes, I think is the short answer. I think it does tell us a little bit about her character. The thing I would just round off that little bit of discussion about Melisandre by saying is that George R. R. Martin, when asked who is the most misunderstood character in Game of Thrones, said Melisandre. And this is probably at least partly because she's does a whole load of bad stuff, but she's doing it because of what she considers to be the greater good for humanity. But also, and a lot of people didn't really pick up on that. They just saw her as being this weird, bad magic user person. But also because there is another layer to her that we've had hints of that we have yet to understand fully. Evan Power. Similar language, watching, liking, etc., is used to describe the dragon skulls in Arya 3. Will Qyburn or Fagon raise these stone dragons? Oh, that's interesting. So the dragons, we have 3 instances of how the dragons reacted to humans. Now, the first was Tyrion. Tyrion remembers going to visit them because Tyrion doesn't come up so much in the later books, but in the first few chapters of book 1, we find out quite how fascinated with dragons he is. So he goes there, and his feeling is, that he seems to really like them. They seem to be friendly in some way. Then we get Arya, who, when she's chasing the cat, stumbles down there, and they seem aggressive towards her, ripping, tearing at her. It's very clear that this is just the language, but she gets caught on one of the teeth, that kind of thing. And then the third time, Arya goes back when she is escaping after we get the death of Syria Farrell. Let's not go down that side track. Whatever happened to Syria Farrell, she escapes, and this is her way out of the Red Keep, is back out through that route. And interestingly, there, I was re-listening to it quite recently, then she feels that they welcome her like an old friend, which is a fascinating change to how they first reacted to her. But this does come back to what you're saying, is that we do get this kind of feel with these dragon skulls. My take is that this is trying to show that these aren't just they're not just dead statues. We don't get this with any other kind of random statues. This is magical. Dragons are magical creatures, and so yes, even if they're dead, the magic is still in and around them. And so the statues down in the crypt of Winterfell are magical statues. And that, I think, is what the link is for them. Does this mean that Qyburn's going to be raising them? I mean, I wouldn't say definitely, absolutely no, because we do get this dragons raised from stone thing, and there are so many hints about statues coming to life. But I think not. I think that's just they are just there as a sort of an echo of a previous age. Question from Marley. Yes, a bit like the chess pieces in Hogwarts, but and also the Hogwarts statues, a bit like that kind of feel. Cloaked One for Mattia Dominique. Thank you so much. I love it when people do this, and you do this a lot, Cloaked One, picking up on questions for others in the chat. What is your take on why it didn't affect Thoros to resurrect Beric many times, but it did kill Beric to revive Lady Stoneheart? Also, why didn't Thoros resurrect anyone else? Okay. So, why didn't it affect Thoros to resurrect Beric many times, but it did kill Beric to revive Lady Stoneheart? So, Beric was doing effectively a different thing. He was giving up his life force. He was done. He was spent. He was giving up his life force for Lady Stoneheart. So that was what he was intentionally doing. That wasn't what Thoros was intentionally doing. He was intentionally bringing back the Thoros, Beric, except for the first time, which I've got a specific question on that first time, which I will come to. But why didn't it cost? Because the cost was borne by Beric, is the short answer there. Each time Beric lost more of himself. And yes, some of this is that something lingers and something is lost after you die, but that is the cost. That is the cost of this magic, was that Beric came back less of a person than when he was before. Why didn't Thoros resurrect anyone else? I think he felt that Beric was the chosen one, so to speak. I would have to go through again to see whether he ever tried doing anyone else. I've not actually looked for that, but he definitely had the impression that Beric was there on a mission from having been brought back. Clearly the Red God wanted him back, and therefore that was why he focused his attention in on him. Mara Lee, sorry, I just saw your comment, and now you did a super chat on it as well, so I will answer it properly now. Thank you, Mara, saying, will the Stark statues coming alive to protect Winterfell be similar to the Hogwarts statues coming alive to protect Hogwarts Castle in the last book and movie? Yes, but it's more, I think. It's more. So it's been a while since I read or saw the last part of Harry Potter, but the statues there were there in defense of Hogwarts. That is an inbuilt defensive measure. The idea with the Stark statues is that they're not just there to defend Winterfell. They are there specifically to be taking, and all of these things up in the north that come from the end of the First Long Night are connected to facing the others, facing the army of the dead. So that is what they are there to do. They're not just there to defend Winterfell. Winterfell in and of itself is not the thing that needs to be saved. Humanity is what needs to be saved, so they can move out. And there's also a lot, I mean, it's darker in a way. The more human element to this is that the Stark spirits and souls of the dead Starks were not released. They were held captive for hundreds, for thousands of years, waiting for them to be called into action. They are not just statues that got brought to life. These are the spirits and souls of dead Starks who have been bound in place by ancient magic, and then finally they will be able to get their release. So there is a qualitative difference between just a random statue coming to life and the soul of a dead King of Winter bound into a statue, performing a duty that has been placed upon them by some presumably huge sacrifice and promise made millennia ago. This is ancient and horrific in its own way. The Jack of Hearts, thank you, saying, hi, Robert, hope you're well. I am, thank you. How would you say the magic system of A Song of Ice and Fire compares to that portrayed in The Lord of the Rings? Well, I think that they are similar-ish, and maybe I'll go through at some point and do a proper analysis of them. One thing I would say is that they both have a natural element to them. I got a question on this coming up, but in A Song of Ice and Fire, the magic of the children of the forest, the old gods, this appears to be very connected in with nature, with how things are, with Westeros, with the trees, with the connecting up the entire continent underground. This is rooted in the planet and is therefore, yes, it's magic, but it's also very natural. This is just how it is in this world. And Tolkien, it's the same. You get the magic of, particularly when you think of like the Ents and you think of the elvish magic, this is very much, this is rooted in the earth. This is part of what is Middle Earth, part of creation very much in Tolkien's world. So that is there, but for both there is another sort, there are other sorts of magic. Tolkien definitely has magic which is from his Eru Ilúvatar, which is the god of Tolkien's world. So you get the magicians, of which there are a very limited number. We know of 5, there may have been slightly more, but the magicians, the wizards, the Astari, Gandalf, Radagast, Saruman, the 2 blue wizards, they were magical beings. They were Maiar, and effectively angelic beings who came across, and so their magic makes them slightly different. They aren't just learned people who've learnt some tricks. They are magical beings, but it's often misunderstood that in the world of the Lord of the Rings, as in the world of Ice and Fire, magic comes at a cost, and the cost comes generally to the magic user. So Gandalf, for example, when he uses magic, he gets tired, he gets worn out, he has to recover afterwards. Little bits and pieces here and there, no, that's fine. But if he does big magic, that really takes its toll on him. And then you get other types of magic, which is sort of a mockery of, this is in Tolkien's world, a mockery of the good magic, the natural magic, the things that are part of coming from Melkor, all of that, the creation of the orcs. This is a mockery of the elves. This is all interconnected. Over in George R. R. Martin's world, lots of people say our magic comes from this god or from these gods, but it is not 100% clear because we will never see the gods in the world of Ice and Fire. It is not 100% clear that it does. The magic that is done in the name of one god appears suspiciously familiar to the magic that appears in another god. So it is not actually about the god's magic. It seems to be, this is the world allows magic, and people can study it in order to become magicians, unlike what you get in the Lord of the Rings, where most people, yes, there are some people who can study and become sorcerers, but the big 5 wizards they are angelic beings. So there are lots of different contrasts, but fundamentally it's the difference between, does this magic come from above, or is it just a part of the way that world operates? You think I had a question from JR. Tyrion is clearly touched by a stone man, but doesn't get greyscale. Is this evidence of Tyrion Targaryen? Is the Targaryen resistance to illness magic? Okay, so Targaryens do seem to have a general resistance to being ill. This is something that they held up as being a sign of their exceptionalism, why they are different, better to everyone else in Westeros, therefore born to lead, born to rule. Now, this, and you can tell from the tone of my voice that I don't particularly like that, but that is what their doctrine of exceptionalism was all about. This is Jaehaerys who came up with this. And so it is really interesting that immediately after that, his own children start getting struck down by illness. They are not immune to all illness. They just seem to have a high tolerance to a lot of sicknesses that impact many other humans. Of the sicknesses that get Targaryens, they do seem to be, it has to be said, particularly susceptible to the kind of the greyscale illnesses. Shireen, as we know, has got some Targaryen blood in her, so the greyscale that she gets is not a surprise. We have a couple of other Targaryens who also catch greyscale. So this should not be a surprise, though, because the whole the greyscale as a sickness itself came from water magic, the magic of the Rhoynar, against the Valyrians. This was a huge revenge bit of magic. Prince Garin was captured there in Troyrain, which became this area, the Sorrows, where the Tyrion was grabbed by the Snowmen, where all the Snowmen live. And this seems to be a magic that was a revenge against the Valyrians for what they did. And incidentally, when you get, there's this very strange bit where the boat there on the Shy Maid, it seems to have got through and all is well, but then suddenly strangely comes back, and then the Stone Men attack. That happens directly after the revelation that there's a Targaryen on board. So that's the thing. It is targeted at the Targaryens. So that's a slightly long and rambling way of saying, actually, if anything, I think this is evidence against Tyrion Targaryen. But I don't think it's the biggest evidence we have. Question from Mara Lee. Again, Mara, thank you so much. Very generous today. Thank you. Is that then part of the reason for the importance of the crypts and for there always being a Stark at Winterfell? Yeah, absolutely. So that's the theory I have, is that you get this, there must always be a Stark at Winterfell. Why the crypts are important. When Winterfell started, all of the evidence says that actually they started just with the crypts. That was what it was. The castle came later. The castle came in sections, a bit at a time, over hundreds, thousands of years. What was Winterfell was the crypts. So yes, this is why why it's so important that the Starks always being there, because the family agreed some deal a long time ago, which seems to have been with the Children of the Forest about the defense of humanity. Question from Tam Hutchins. Just wanted to say hello and express how happy and lucky I feel to have caught you live. Well, hello and welcome. Usually I'm listening to your live streams. Great content, thank you, after everyone has gone home. Well, thank you very much, and I'm glad you have made it here on time. Do get involved in the chat as you are here live. It's a different experience if you can be involved in the chat while we are going through. I always say it, but there are so many very clever and knowledgeable people in the chat that if I miss something, then they will pick up on it. JKLC55, how was Melisandre so sure about her shadow baby abilities in A Clash of Kings? In her Dance with Dragons chapter, it seems like she's very uncertain about what she can do. So, yes, but she certainly seems to have very strong belief in her abilities to do some things, and then slightly less certain about other things. Now, the shadow magic, this is not, I mean, she thinks it's all one and the same thing, but this is not what she was taught in the temple. This is from a Shy. Now, we don't know when she was a Shy. She's known as Melisandre of a Shy. She learnt magic there. She learnt shadow magic. The Shadowmancers are the Shy magicians, a Shy under the shadow. So all of the shadow baby stuff, that is a Shy magic. She learnt that. And so it may well be that she is that's a skill that she's learnt, a magical skill that she's learnt. In terms of her self-doubts in the chapter we have from her POV, we don't have any fundamental doubts about her ability to do magic. What we do have is a very clear understanding that sometimes she does stuff just for effect. Sometimes she doesn't do magic but pretends she does. Sometimes she does magic but makes it look more powerful than it is. She's got a whole load of powders that she like throws into flames to make them go different colors, that kind of thing. So it's not that she doubts her own ability to do magic, and certainly at the wall she feels that her magical powers are even greater, but she's running low on her potions and all the rest of it to start with. But she does sometimes have more doubts about her interpretation of things and what she should do than she lets on, because her strong belief is that she has to come across as powerful. She has to come across as being 100% right about stuff, or otherwise people will not believe her and follow her. I mean, there's probably an element of truth in that. What the doubt comes in the most is when she looks in the flames. She never doubts that she can see the right things, but she just she's not sure exactly how to interpret it all the time, but she pretends that she's 100% sure. So it's slightly nuancy, not so much doubting her powers. She can always see things in the flames. She never doubts that she sees things in the flames, but it's like she doesn't understand why she sees pictures of Jon Snow when she's asking for Azor Ahai reborn. There may be a reason for why she does that she doesn't even think about yet, but that's what it is. It's not doubt about her ability to do magic per se. It's her doubts about how to put it across, how to be certain, what to be certain of. Marina Nor saying, so is Melisandre good or evil? George R. R. Martin, in my view, does not play with those clear dividing lines. She is a character who believes she is doing good and is willing to do some evils in order to achieve a greater good. And he allows us to make a judgment call on how we view her. And I suspect he wouldn't want us to just categorize her as one or the other. He would want us to have a slightly more nuanced view. Question from Lauren Griffith. Looking forward to signing up to Patreon. Oh, welcome. That's very kind of you, and a perfect opportunity to say thank you to my patrons. Patrons, I hugely appreciate your support. Your support is what allows me to devote the time that I do to produce these live streams, to do the preparation for them, to produce the videos and all of those things. So thank you so much. I hugely appreciate it. If you do want to support this channel, then the best way to do that is through Patreon. There's a link down in the description. Being a patron does bring various benefits. You get priority questions for these live streams. You also get things like I did some audio narrations from the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter, things like that. So if you're interested, have a look at Patreon and go over and see what is there. I would hugely appreciate it. But thank you. And so Lauren saying that no question yet, just sending love and getting you to say great googly moogly out loud. There you go. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate that. Andrew K saying, in Deep Geek, Mel supposedly has a strong accent from the Ashai area. So when she went or was brought there, was likely quite young and for a predominant part of her life. Yeah, absolutely. So she spent a large part of her time down in Ashai, which is why her magical powers are very shadow focused. And I should just say the way that she rationalizes this is that the Lord of Light is about light and fire, and it is light and fire that causes shadows. Therefore, the Lord of Light has control over shadows as well. Therefore, she's doing law magic when she does shadow magic. That's her justification. Whether or not we think that stacks up is a completely different thing. Cloaked One for Lady Leaf Underhill. Thank you again, Cloaked One. Saying Mel seems to be slowly becoming a fire white rather than the whiting process of all other known whites. Could that be true? So is she slowly becoming a fire white rather than the whiting process? Maybe. I don't think we have enough information yet to say for certain. What we can say is that she is not she's not normal human. That much is absolutely clear. She hardly sleeps. She spends the entire night staring into the fire. She hardly ever eats. She does eat sometimes, so it's not like she doesn't eat at all, but she hardly eats. Her power is coming from somewhere. My instinct is that she is a fire white, but if she could be slowly turning into one, these things do require sacrifice in some way, so we have to ask where that is coming from. My take is that was a thing which happened a long time ago, but yes, maybe this is a long, slow process. We don't know how, if that's real. We haven't seen it before, and we don't know how that might be powered by sacrifice, but it's a nice idea. Will Foreign saying an idea from a member in the community named L, but it's so good I had to shout them out. Magical face-off between Euron and Marwyn through the glass candle. Okay, I mean, what we don't know about glass, we'll talk about glass candles a bit more in a moment. I've got some questions from patrons about that. We know that you can see stuff. We know that you can communicate, and whether you can have a magical face-off in whatever way that is, we do not know. Whether you can have a battle of wills, we do not know. What Marwyn's role is, as far as we can tell, or his plot trajectory, is to go over to Dany and be her maester, and be a maester that is sympathetic to magic, that is sympathetic to dragons. That is what his role and place is. For there to be some kind of magical face-off between Euron and Dany would seem to imply that Euron is trying to get to Dany in some way. I mean, it's possible, but that's quite a few sort of iterations of plot away. My Euron is going to be interested in getting dragons, and he wants Dany for himself, but I think his attention will be diverted over towards Old Town and then on towards Castle Rock and Cersei personally. It's only towards the end, when we're getting towards A Dream of Spring, that we have Dany who is going to be in his way. So maybe, but I haven't seen any build up to that yet. If it is going to happen, we'd have to get an increased understanding of how glass candles work, because we haven't been told that they work that way yet, and B, we would need the plot to move on in the Winds of Winter to get a point where Marwyn Euron is a thing. As it stands, it doesn't appear to be a thing. Question from John Alexander. In the last Bran chapter, Leaf says the gods created the singers, but Jojen says the gods are old green seers. Both can't be true, can they? Well, I mean, this is a bit of a chicken and egg situation, I guess. The spell singers are These are the magical children of the forest. They, when they end, go up into the trees, and that they then become effectively the old gods through the trees. It is a convoluted form of ancestor worship. So when Leaf is saying that the gods created the singers, this is the perpetuation of the cycle of passing on from the previous generation to the next generation. So if we try and think of it in that sense as being very much an earth magic-y way of this being a cycle, then both could be true in a way, I guess. So yes, you get a chicken and egg situation, what came first, but once you're beyond that and you actually see, as we're told to see, the weirwoods themselves see time just as a sort of a river. And so we should just, if we take it in that perspective, then yes, it could make sense. Question also from Nemo Nova. On behalf of Ken Floyd, thank you very much for picking up for Ken Floyd. Please explain Firewhite. Okay, very happy to. So we have the term white, which was used throughout the first books and through the TV show, pretty exclusively to refer to the reanimated corpses that the others create and control. So these are whites. Now, there came a point, George R. R. Martin did an interview with one of the big magazines, someone like Entertainment Today, when he had this, he came out with this phrase, fire whites, and he said that Beric Dondarrion is a fire white. Now, this obviously led everybody within the fandom to go, okay, so there are different types of whites, and there are. Now, this very clearly, we've got the reanimated corpses that what we used to just call whites are, we generally now think of as ice whites, reanimated corpses controlled by the others. Fire whites seem to be people who have they have died, but through fire magic. This is through Thoros of Myr, so the magic seems to at the moment predominantly be coming from R'hllor, because they're fire magic. Their spirits are called back into their bodies in some way, and they can carry on powered by magic, and they lose part of themselves, and they very slowly become less and less human. They don't need to sleep, they don't need to eat, they forget much of their past. It's just that they're just driven by the things that they are clinging onto the most. That is what a fire white is. The classic example is Beric Dondarrion. Beric Dondarrion then sort of passed his life essence on into Lady Stoneheart, who was also, she has been called back, but only a part of her character is called back. So the clear distinction is what the magic is. The fire whites have been, they are who they are, but part of them has gone. Beric Dondarrion is Beric Dondarrion as a fire white, brought back from the dead, but part of who he is has disappeared. But the ice whites, they are dead, but their dead bodies are being animated by the others. Now, there is some speculation that perhaps they may be remembering part of their life beforehand. We don't know all of the details of that. Sam, I think it is, speculates that maybe they did, because when back in book 1, when a couple of the whites are brought South of the wall and into Castle Black, they go looking for Jeor Mormont. Othor does. The Ice White that was Othor goes hunting for Jeor Mormont and seems to know where he is, which seems to imply some sort of memory. But they do very much appear to be controlled by the others, not that person come back but having lost a little bit. So that's the sort of the distinction between them. Then we get we move on to other things, and we say I tend to refer to science whites as what Qyburn is producing down in King's Landing. Others often talk about other types of whites, that we have a water white in Patchface and so on. But the two types that George R. R. Martin has talked about being normal ice whites and fire whites. Question from the Hammer Time 51. What is it about the return of the dragons that ushers magic back to the world? Okay, so fascinating stuff. So I've talked before about this idea that there are some things, some principles of magic. We talk about sacrifice and intentionality. Another principle of magic seems to be that we need some magic in order for other magic to exist. By that I mean that when the dragons came back, the dragons are magical beings. That, and these are my words, not George R. R. Martin's words, that seemed to increase the ambient magic level of the world and boosted other people's ability to use magic. So, for example, when Dany gets to Karth, there's a fire mage who used to just do little tricks, but now he's doing very impressive fire magic. And Quaithe tells her that this is because the dragons have returned. Similarly, the pyromancers in King's Landing, they seem to be more powerful now because the dragons have returned. Now, is this just dragons? I personally don't think so, because Melisandre, when she's at the wall, thinks my magic is more powerful here. The wall, as we know, is not just a physical barrier. It is fundamentally, this is a huge bit of magic. A magical line drawn across a continent. This is a massive amount of magic. And it seems, therefore, that her magic is amplified by the presence of more magic. So if you have some magic in the area, then more magic can happen. If lots of magic goes away, with the end of the dragons, for example, then other types of magic, the pyromancers, their magic doesn't work. Again, another classic example of the glass candles, that when magic, lots of the big magic left the world, glass candles weren't working. When dragons reappeared, they started working again. So that's one of the principles we have, is that if you have big magic, that allows more magic through some sort of ambient level of magic within the world. Carolina Clay saying, how is she Melisandre of Asshai if we know from the World of Ice and Fire that there are no children in Asshai? I imagine a magical accident happened there and wiped out plants and animals, analog to a nuclear accident. Yes, so because she is of Asshai, that does not necessarily mean that she was born in Asshai. You are absolutely correct that children are not born in Asshai. But she seems to be of Asshai in the same way that the shadow binders and shadow magicians, they are of Asshai. So she very probably, she was sold into slavery, and at a young age she went to Asshai, and through her formative years, children don't seem to be, they're not born there, they there don't seem to be any children around there. Why on earth would you send a child to a Shire after all? But if in her formative years and for a long period of time she studied in a Shire, then when she came back to the west of Essos, she would be known as Melisandre of Ashai, because that's where she has been, because so few people come from there. It's very, very rare to find someone who has been to Ashai. We can name a few characters, but we know them because they're very, very rare. Ashai is a dark and mysterious place. I think that's me caught up in the chat. One more, Marilee, saying, speaking of magic, you have fabulous merch. Thank you. I just want to know if you will be putting a Blame Bloodraven t-shirt for sale at some point. Would also love a Dan-centric one too. I think, well, Blame Bloodraven, people keep on asking me. I will do this at some point. Absolutely, yes. Apologies. It tends to be slightly lower down. People who watch these live streams a lot will know I'm not the best at plugging my own merch, but it tends to be slightly lower down my list of priorities below making videos. But I will try my best to put my mind to it, and I'll try and get some good art for it. Jess Kwando saying, no question, just wanted to thank you for all you do. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's very kind. Nat Westwood saying, hello, Robert. Watched and enjoyed a lot of these and have never commented before. And I'm happy to answer your first comment. What is the thing that decides whether a sacrifice is sufficient enough to cause a magical consequence? The laws of the universe is probably the best but most unhelpful answer I can give. The sacrifice that you make is in some way related to the outcome that you get. So you get only death can pay for life is the kind of that's something that Miri Mazdur says, which sounds about right. It has to be equivalent in some way. If all you're wanting to do is just create a little magic trick, then some pretty fireworks or something, then it doesn't cost much. But if you're wanting to do something huge, then it's a lot, which incidentally does make us call into question Melisandre's leech magic. Now, she is using what she claims to do was do king's blood to cause 3 kings to die. She got this king's blood from the illegitimate son of Robert Baratheon. Now, she then, with the liches, this was Edric Storm in the books. This was obviously Gendry on the TV show. The 3 leeches get the blood, and then they get burned up, and she basically makes a big thing of, and these 3 false kings are all going to die. And sure enough, over the course of the next couple of years, they do all die, and she's, see, I'm very powerful, me. It does seem unlikely, given the sort of the law of balances, that you have to make a great sacrifice in order to make a great bit of magic going on, that simply leeching off a little bit of blood from someone who actually wasn't in line to the throne at all would cause the death of 3 kings. I suspect that this is just her claiming a victory there, rather than, which we know that she does do, rather than actually that's she caused that. Okay, questions from patrons. Let's go over to Sylvia Galasso. Ciao, Robert. Ciao. My question is about the magic of the others. It does not seem to work south of the wall, meaning that we do not see them raising the dead who are on that side. However, when Othor is brought back to Castle Black, they somehow animate out of the blue. Is that because he had already been turned into a white past the wall? And who was in control of his actions at that point? Is there a chance that as the others get closer to the wall, they might be raising the deads on the other side and use them to open the gate. I mean, I love your thinking. What seems to have happened is that they were, and I was reading this just the other day, actually, because spoiler alert, my next Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire video, which I've just finished writing, so expect it in a week or so's time, is what happened to Benjen. And we get some clues from this event. So Othor and Jafer Flowers, who were the two Night's Watchmen who we're talking about here, they were found dead north of the wall. Sam investigates their bodies. Now, first of all, they didn't just die. They had been dead for a long time. They didn't die there. They died somewhere else and then came to there. So the implication is that they were made whites somewhere further north of the wall and then made their way down to where they were found. And they were whites at that point. The other clues we have are there. They have got blue eyes, it's noted. They had blue eyes before they were brought south of the wall. The animals do not want to go near to them at all. They are whites who are just, pun intended, playing dead at this point. In order to be carried south of the wall, and at that point, they are then reanimated. They come to life again. Now, what we do not know is the extent to which what happened then was them under the control of the others, or, as was speculated by the Night's Watch at the time, I think it was by Sam, that this was them retaining some memories of their previous life. Whatever it was, they targeted trying to kill, and this is a plan that the others seem to have, targeted trying to kill the command structure of the Night's Watch, the people who are in charge. They tried to kill J.R. Mormont, Jeremy Viker. The more I read it, the more I come to the conclusion that the reason why we get Waymar Royce picked on is simply because he looks and acts and is a part of the command structure of the Night's Watch. He was in charge, and so they targeted him the same way they targeted the other leaders of the Night's Watch, because they are about to invade. And what do? You target the leaders and leave the defenders in disarray. Absolute military sense for that to be happening. So, to return to this, the magic done, the making them whites, was done north of the wall, and then they were physically brought south of the wall and then could do stuff. So that is what it was. The wall provides the magical barrier that, as far as we're aware, means that they cannot then just sort of like raise up some, stand on one side of the wall and just sort of, come on, raise up, and the dead bodies rise up. That doesn't seem to be the way that this is going to work. So getting them on the other side of the wall and using them to open the gate. No, the other reason for that is because the wall is not just the physical barrier. It is a magical barrier, and it's the magical barrier that's stopping the others. Probably also stopping the whites, and the only reason they came across is because they were carried across by the Night's Watch. Diego Godoy saying, "Hola, Robert. Hola. Do you think the magic of the old gods passes through the Stark blood? Do you think Ned Stark could have been a warg if given the chance? Say if the mother of the direwolf pups had survived?" Yes, I think it does go through the Stark blood. I think it goes through the blood of the first men, so it's not just the Starks. The Blackwoods have it as well, and a lot of other northern families do. So could Ned have been a warg if the mother had survived? Yes, quite possibly. We don't see much evidence of him doing the warging thing, but it kind of makes sense. It's very, very rare for, we're told skin changes are 1 in 1,000, green seers are 1 in 1,000 skin changes. All of the Stark kids seem to be skin changes. That is incredibly rare. So there is something going on there. And for that to be, that didn't seem to come from the Tullys, from Catelyn. So that must have come from the Stark line. So yes, Ned at the very least is a carrier of the skin changer gene. And Nat Westwood saying, I should say thank you for all the videos also. How rude of me. Sorry, thank you. Very polite, but absolutely not necessary. Thank you very much. Question from Jordan Walker. Hi, Robert. Thank you for all the wonderful content. I hope you don't mind a slightly broader question. We're constantly unsure of magical limitations in both Westeros and Middle-earth. Do you prefer this ambiguity to a more rule-based magical system? Also, could you give an example of a rule-based magical system you found to work particularly well? On that note, I really enjoyed your video detailing what powers Gandalf possesses. Well, thank you for that. I enjoyed making that video, actually. In terms of do I like the unclear boundaries of magic, or rather than rules based, I do genuinely like a slight uncertainty about magic. That works really well for me, because the moment it turns into here's a very clear set of rules, it starts to turn from something that is magical and unexplained and unknowable, and turn it into something that is, this is just how this universe works. This is just how this operates. So I like the slight ambiguity. I like the uncertainty. I like the idea that you do not know how much power somebody has. You do not know what they're willing to sacrifice. So that works really well. What I do like in other kind of magical systems is when you get people playing around with this idea of what you have to sacrifice, or how the magical system could work. Because the idea that it's completely free doesn't work, because then there's nothing to hold anything back. One thing that I loved the feel of was Robin. I talk about it quite a lot, but in Robin Hobb's Farseer trilogy, there's a magic called the Skill, which is a magic passed down just through the kingly bloodline, so to speak. And for that, the twist on that is that it is addictive. It is draining, but it feels almost like a drug addict. And so the person who is using it, they could be using it for good purposes, but they want to go back and use it to feel the thrill of the magic use in them, and that people have to haul them away to stop them doing it, to keep them in the real world. And that, I find that an incredibly powerful kind of limiter on magic, not because you can't do it because you're physically stopped, but you want to do it more, and it's you throwing yourself into it. I also love the world of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke it's a wonderful book to start with. Absolutely beautiful. And actually, I should probably say this: if you like the stories, this is a completely different book by Susanna Clarke. I thought that she wasn't going to write anymore, and then just last year she released that marvelous, wonderful Piranesi. Anyway, complete digression. In Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, there are two ways of doing magic. You get this scholarly approach to magic that does work. you have to work hard at it. You can do some magical effects if you understand it, but it turns it into a very kind of dry academic subject. People write theses on it, and then you get magic users who just naturally go with the flow, and that creates a wonderful dynamic in that between people who really work at it, and that's the sacrifice they're making, is having to really work at it, and people who are going with the flow, who are playing with fire, sometimes quite literally, and that is how they are the sacrifices they're making. And it's never spelt out in exactly that way, but that is how it is. It's not just one thing that affects things in the same way. The way you approach it, the way you approach magic, is the thing which determines the amount and type of sacrifice that you have to undertake. So a couple of examples there of magic systems that I think are really well thought through. Matthew Dominic saying Aziz would have been proud of that pun. Aziz is the king of puns, so I would never dare to try and take that from him. Question from Sebastian Holden. Hi, Robert. Naked Knight Theory. Getting you to check it out costs more than a faceless man. Love your mods. Please say Higa Herga and Googly Woogly. I'm happy to say both of them. The Naked Knight Theory. I have checked it out for you. Now, this is, if I'm looking at the theory that I think you're wanting me to look at, this is this idea of Barristan Selmy, who right back book 1, when he's there being stripped of his armor, and he basically says, okay, you can take the white cloak from me, but I'm still a knight. And then Littlefinger sort of quips, a naked knight, it would appear, because his armor is coming off of him, and everybody laughs at him, and this sort of creates this idea of this concept of him being the naked knight. Transfer him over to Slaver's Bay, Meereen, then the fact that he wears armor, and we've had this a few times. So Jorah was very much seen as an oddity for wearing armor, and so Barristan wearing armor is seen as an oddity, and not just an oddity, but people see it as not right, not fair in a way, and he should not be wearing it. And people, when he fights, people shout at him to be taking off his armor. Now, so is this a hint back to the idea that he is the naked knight, that he is actually going to end up defeated and stripped of his armor? And I saw, I'm afraid I can't remember who wrote this, who came up with this theory. You can hunt for it yourself. The idea that perhaps he is the person who is being, in one of Dany's visions in the House of the Undying, who is dragged behind a white horse, because he uses the white horse to be charging into battle, dragged naked behind the white horse. As I say, I've seen it. I like the thinking. It's quite nice. It doesn't quite add up for me on a couple of levels. Yes, the sort of the imagery and symbolism is all there. I think that the person being dragged behind her white horse is the person who tried to poison her in book 1. That did happen. He got dragged behind her white horse naked. So that does seem to be what that image is of. So it doesn't need to be Barristan. And also, I think Barristan will have another role to play. His story is not yet ended. It may not have much further to go, but he will meet and greet Tyrion on arrival. He is the person who is that he is the hand of the king, effectively, waiting for Dany to return, and he is the person who's going to have to start making decisions about all of these people coming to see Dany in her absence. Tyrion, Ser Jorah, the Victarion, Marwyn, lots of people are going to be coming, and he is the person who's going to be holding the fort. And I think that he is he is going to be the person who is going to have to explain to Dany, particularly when it comes to Tyrion, who he is and why she shouldn't just kill him on the spot, because he does know who Tyrion is. And part of me wonders whether the idea of Fagon may also play into this. He may have, and I think there's just as much foreshadowing that he may head towards when Tyrion tells him about Fagon, this person who is baby Aegon, allegedly, that Barristan had sworn to protect. He will be tempted to go to him rather than to Daenerys. It's just a possibility. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it's just a possibility. So, yes, I like the theory. I like the thinking. It doesn't quite work for me. And reflective rambling, yes, I did catch the miniseries for Jonathan Strange. I thought it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. The books are even better, but I did really enjoy the TV show. Coach 1 for Mike Hall. Thank you again for picking this up. Some Targaryens have involuntary prophetic dreams. The Starks often warg in their dreams. Isn't this unintentional magic? Yeah, so I think that this is where I draw this distinction between just the way that the world works and how magic is a part of the world and attempting a thing in order to achieve a thing. I think that there's a difference here. So the Stark warging, this is skin changing warging, this is just a part of how the world works. Some people have connections with animals. That's just a part of how the world works. It's not magic. It's not doing a thing. It is not a one-off attempting to achieve something. It is just how things are. Similarly, you get prophetic dreams. Some Targaryens get prophetic dreams. I think is just this is just how things are. This is something that a nature of being a Targaryen. There are other elements of being Targaryen that are sort of magical. The way that they can bond with dragons, the fact that they have fire resistance. It gives the impression that they can't be burned. They can, but they've got heat resistance. These are just part of how they are. This is not an attempt to produce an effect. So I draw a line myself between things that are in a magical world and things that you can do within a magical world. I don't think it's a false distinction. I think that it certainly works for me anyway. Reflective rambling. So yeah, about Jonathan Strange, Mr. Norrell. The book was utterly amazing. Just didn't see many people hyped about their adaptation. I think the problem with it was very good, but it just the book was so much at another level. If you've not read the book, I would highly recommend it. Question from Dan McKay. A Song of Ice and Fire starts out as low magic fantasy. The level of magic feels like it is increasing as we go through the books, but only very slowly. 2 questions. First, your prediction. Do you think the level of overt magic will get considerably higher towards A Dream of Spring? And secondly, do you want it to? So I think, yes, George R. R. Martin has deliberately created this world that started out feeling like it's low magic, and is going to end as very high magic. I don't see any way that it cannot end as very high magic. We have a continent which is being invaded from one side by a zombie undead army, and from the other side by some dragons. This is going to be a magical end game to the story. We've got prophecies that may well not come exactly right, but a lot of them are coming right. We have got magical beasts. We have got magic users. We've got the Weirwood network. We've got what appears to be time travel going. The amount of magic is just going to be huge as we go through it. So it will end up very much high fantasy. Everybody's going to know and believe that magic exists in the world. So yes, I think it's going to happen, and I'm quite glad. I love both low and high fantasy, and I'm very happy with the way that George R. R. Martin has gone through that process of bringing us through from low fantasy up to high fantasy. Damakay also asked, why would descendants of the first men be more likely to have the gifts of green sight and skin changing than other races of men, unless they had a bit of the blood of the children of the forest in them? The first men could have learned some skills from the children way back when, but learned skills wouldn't be inheritable. So did the children and the first men interbreed? I think it's yes, quite possibly. There are lots of hints of it. Certainly in the neck, there is lots of hints that the Cranagmen are related to, intermarried with the children of the forest, and some others up in the north. So yes, that seems to be the case. Could some of them have got it through some magical transfer of powers? That's also possible. We don't know. But what we do know is that that type of magic, the old gods, the children of the forest, the first men, that is a Westeros-focused bit of magic. That is all about Westeros as a continent and how that operates. So when the other groups of humanity came in, the Andals, the Rhoynar, they brought their own types of magic in and their own traditions, and that is why they are different. That is why they do not have that inherited magic of the first men, green seer capacity. We don't know exactly why, whether it was some magical transference or whether it was some kind of intermarrying. It doesn't really matter. We know that they were close back in the old days, and therefore the magic passes down through both. Reflective Rambling for Tipmaster. Thank you, Reflective Rambling. I hugely appreciate it picking up on a question for someone else. You guys think there is any blood magic significance to Brienne killing Shagwell and his thugs underneath a weirwood tree? She also buries Nimble Dick Crab, this is, underneath it. So yeah, this is at the end of Brienne's wanderings. She's searching for the Stark children, and she gets attacked and killed. There is a weirwood tree there. This is in Cracklaw Point, and she kills them. And her guide, Nimble Dick Crab, she buries him under a weirwood tree. Is there significance to it? I think we just have to wait and see on that one. I think symbolically, probably, because they're hunting for the Starks, and this is about truth, and plot-wise, probably because the Weirwood network is all created. Therefore, this means that the Weirwood witnessed it, which means that Bran and Bloodraven will be able to be aware of it, and so they will then start to be able to influence Brienne, because they know that they've got somebody who's looking for Sansa and Arya, and they will be able to start influencing her as well. So I think there's not a hugely magical thing that suddenly this means that Nimble Dick Crabbe is going to become a part of the Wheel, but no, anything like that. But I think plot-wise, it might have a couple of implications going forward. Lauren Griffith saying, enjoyable IDG traits. Number 1, glasses on to read. Number 2, glasses off to answer question. You can't unsee it. I do this. Number 3, absolutely enjoyably chill voice and geeky enthusiasm. Number 4, awesome chat fam. Well, thank you so much. Yes, you cannot unsee it. There are people who count the amount of times I take my glasses off and put them back on again. But the chat, I would agree, is amazing. I'm glad you're enjoying it there. Megan V, hi there. Good to see you in the chat. It's been a while. Sebastian Holden, the women in the Dance with Dragons prologue, or bit her tongue, the woman, bit her tongue to resist Varamir Six Skins attempting to walk into her. Is this a way to defend against it? Maybe against Euron? I'd not picked up on the Euron link before. Yeah, so basically, Varamir Six Skins is dying, and he wants to walk into a younger body, and he decides, there's a younger woman over there. I'll try and just in the same way Bran goes into Hodor, I'll try and go into her body. Doesn't work. She fights him off. Now, yes, she bites her tongue as part of that. I'd not thought, is this some link across to Euron? Because Euron, of course, cuts tongues out from people. Now, it's a really good catch, because the Euron almost certainly has some sort of warging, skin-changing abilities. We covered this a few live streams ago. Now, he also cuts the tongues out of everyone around him, his crew, a lot of the people he captures. Now, is this because biting your tongue is a way to prevent somebody from walking into you? I don't think so. I think it's just because he doesn't want them to talk, and if you walk into somebody and then jump back out again, they're able to talk and say, this guy just took control of my body. He does not want that to happen. So I think that is the primary reason why. But I like the catch. That's a nice. I'll have a think about that a little bit more. See if there is something else there. I don't think that this is one of those things where you bite your tongue, you're able to not be skin changed into. But it's an interesting one. Okay, let's go to some questions from my patrons. Ross saying, hello Robert, what do we know about the chronology and diffusion of magic in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire? Since all magics share principles like sacrifice, blood, and genealogy, can we assume they stem from the same source and branched off at different points or places? Which types or practices would be the oldest and the most recent? So I've sort of talked about this a little bit so far, but to sort of bring this into this context. So I think there are some bits of magic that are just, this is the way the world operates. This is how this is in this world. So a lot of the magic with skin changing, green sight, that kind of thing, that's just a part of the way that the world operates. The other kinds of magic, have they all branched off from the same place? Well, it does depend on what you think about the history of humanity on Planetos, where they came from. A lot of the magic we can trace links all the way through from the early civilizations, of the hints of them, because, the magic or the information we have about the Great Empire of the Dawn, for example, you can make a lot of it, but it is just a couple of pages in the world of Ice and Fire, and a couple of pages that the Maesters have been revealing to us. So we shouldn't put too much emphasis on it. And George R. R. Martin repeatedly says the old stuff is just legend. But there do seem to be hints that some of the types of magic that were there, the types of understandings of how to do things like the gene splicing with dragons and different creatures, that seems to have worked its way through various different civilizations, the Great Empire of the Dawn, the Old Empire of Geese, and the Valyrian Empire. There does seem to be an echo of that going through time. The other kinds of magic, does it branch off from there? Probably, but a lot of it does seem to be very geography focused. So the Rhoynar have water magic because they worship the River Rhoyne, and the Ashai Shadowbinders, they are in a city with shadows. This seems to be where their magic comes from. It's by the geography of where they are. The Iron Islanders is all to do with the sea. This is not just here's one thread of magic and things spring off of it. Humanity is spread out, and in their area they are discovering magic and ways of using magic. They are probably tapping into the same thing, but in different ways in different parts of the world. That's my take on it. There is a thread, but that is not just one thread with different things coming off of it. Sydney Rose. Hello, Grandmaster Robert and the Honourable Dan. It seems like magic is very much connected to environments and ecosystems in the Song of Ice and Fire. I was just talking about this. But there are individuals like Beric and Melisandre who can wield their specific types of magic wherever they go. Do you think these individuals just have an understanding of their respective magic abilities and limitations, or is magic enhanced based on the natural environment? Hashtag horror botany. Also, big fantasy question. Is there a fundamental difference between natural magic and man-made magic? I always think that in fiction, alchemy reveals humanity's limited understanding of the natural world and larger universe, but is natural magic ever meant to be fully understood? Okay, so difference between natural and learned magic. Yes, I think there is a difference here. So the Melisandre is very clearly, these are things that I have learned how to do. I have studied, I now know how to read the flames, see things in the flames. The Thoros of Myr, he brought Beric back. Once he'd done it once, he then understood how to do it again. This was a thing that he'd learned, he'd understood. This can be compared to the natural types of magic that I've been talking about before. The arch user of what you call alchemy here is Qyburn. Qyburn is not a nice character. He's not a good character, but he does seem to understand how the world works. And he is, when he's creating science wights, he is using his understanding of how the world works to achieve the ends that he wants to achieve that look very similar to magical effects. So this is George R. R. Martin, I think, doing a nod, yes, to Frankenstein, but also doing a nod to this classic Arthur C. Clarke concept of any technology that is sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. Now, Qyburn is basically saying, I'm now understanding what is going on here, and this is therefore not actually magic. This is me using science to achieve a certain end. I've followed these rules and I've got this result. Magic is how the world operates. This is the laws of how the world operates, and he is understanding how that works. He is codifying it. So it is sort of like what I was saying with that Arthur C. Clarke quote, but it's not that there's technology that is up here and people are mistaking it for magic. It is magic that's up here, and people do not yet understand it because the technology has not yet caught up to it. It's a slight twist on the sci-fi approach to make this a fantasy approach to how the world works. Robin Isamar saying, hello, Robert. I hope you and Dan are well. I'm well. As I say, Dan unfortunately been a bit poorly, but is going to be fine. Which type of magic do you think glass candles utilize? And do you think we'll get to experience how they work through a POV character, maybe Sam, since we know they have glass candles at the Citadel? Best wishes from Robin and Peppy the Labrador. Hello, Robin and Peppy the Labrador. Morally also asked, how do glass candles work? And do you see their use playing any significant role in the last 2 books? So, glass candles are dragon glass. They're frozen fire. We know that the ones that are in the Citadel were taken from Valyria. I think that there's a fair chance that this is therefore Valyrian magic. We're not told where they're coming from, but they, like the other bits of fire magic, do seem to now be working following the reintroduction of dragons to the world. So that all kind of fits together. How do they work? We haven't really been given information on this yet. We know that they can be used for communication over long distances. We know they can be used for seeing things across long distances. They seem to be quite similar to the Palantiri of Middle-earth. Those kind of globes, the crystal ball globes that, if you imagine like Saruman with his hand over it, that's not quite how they worked in the books. In the books, they were effectively a kind of a magical telescope, and you look through them and you can see a long distance away. And it's with the power of your mind that you can sort of like zoom and move backwards and forwards and focus in on certain things and then communicate with other people. So, and then if you shift position, you're then looking in a different way and you can see things in different directions. We don't know if that's how glass candles work, but the idea that they are there, this kind of tool for both seeing and potentially communicating, does seem to be there. Now, are we going to see more of them? Almost certainly. There is one left actually there in Marwyn's tower. Sam is there. This is where we leave Sam with a glass candle burning. So almost certainly we will see more of this glass candle. There are, we don't know how many of them, but a lot of them dotted around both Westeros and Essos, certainly in the Citadel. The fact that there are so many of them in the Citadel, we will get to see some of them being used. Will they have a significant role? Yes, because the moment you start introducing this idea that you can see things happening in other areas, that completely changes the dynamic of the story that you have, because no longer do you have people just doing their own thing, not knowing what's happening somewhere else. Now we have people who are doing things on the basis of an understanding of what's there. What would Sam do if he gets his hands on a glass candle? Well, he's going to look at what's happening at the wall. If he looks at what's happening on the wall, what is he going to do? Well, he will want to go back because he'll see what's happened to Jon. And if he looks even further and he sees the White Walkers moving, the others moving south, he will feel, okay, I now need to head north with the information I have. This will hugely affect the timings of what people do and when, because they will know what's happening in different places. Lauren Griffith, why are we okay? Thank you again, by the way, Lauren. Why are we okay with the magic of resurrection, but turn to science to dismiss conception on a magical body. I don't think magic opts out of specific body parts. Could be how the Night's Queen worked too. So we definitely have the magic of resurrection. We think that seems to work. In terms of conception, I mean, I don't think in the world of Ice and Fire we do dismiss this as an idea. There are a few examples. Probably the best is Visenya, who was supposed to have performed some magic to allow her to become pregnant, because she wasn't becoming pregnant with Aegon's child, and so performed some dark arts, and Maegor the Cruel was the result of this. So I think we do think that this is possible within the world of Ice and Fire. When you say I don't think magic opts out of specific body parts, no, I don't think so. When you say it could be how the Night's Queen worked too, we give with the Night's Queen, this is a legend back from the Age of Heroes. So the Night's Queen, this mystical, seemingly female other, who then has the Night's King, who was the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, as her consort, and then there are child sacrifices. Is this how the Night's Queen works? Well, the child sacrifices are to the others, to her. The question is, where do the babies come from? Is this the Night's Queen? Is the Night's Queen where the others come from? Is she the mother of the others in some way? We do not know. So I don't think we're ruling anything out at this stage. But yes, absolutely. Your point is well made. And you followed it up by saying science dismissal in this way being, oh, Jon is dead and comes back, magic. And when we talk about if he can have a baby, we use our science logic to say he can't. No, I understand the point you're making there. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't hold this view that he can't have a baby when he comes back because of science. I think that, he'll be magical. I think Jon also is going to be a special case, because he's not being brought back as a fire white. He will be having come back, having walked into Ghost and then brought back into his body. So his soul and spirit are still there, and his body will also still be relatively intact, having been frozen for a long period of time. So I see no scientific reason why he can't have children after that. He is not going to be like Beric Dondarrion. He will be different. And as I said before, this is just me getting into the mind of George R.R. Martin. But if Jon can have children, if Dany can have children, and if Jon does kill Dany, how much more horrific would be? How much more George R.R. Martin would it be if Dany is pregnant when Jon kills her with his child? That would be, I mean, too much. We're still a long way from that part of the story, so it's just speculation at this point. But yeah, I don't see that there's a scientific or magical reason why he cannot have children. Okay, question from Dan McKay. This is covering this. Something I've said many times is that there's one issue with Beric Dondarrion, his first resurrection, which seems to break these rules of both intentionality and sacrifice. Dan McKay says, the revival of Beric Dondarrion is a magic act that seems to lack intentionality, as you have said, and this seems to distinguish it from all other magic in the books. However, this bothers me less than it seems to bother you. I think because I see Thoros of Myr as having willingly and deliberately engaged in the magical ritual act of the last kiss. The fact that Thoros did not have any expectation whatsoever of the ritual's success does not necessarily change the fact that he actively performed the magical ritual, which he knew was traditionally done. at least originally with a specific intention of raising the dead. I can make an attempt to do a thing with no confidence of success and then be shocked when I do succeed. So am I convinced by this? So yeah, the background, as I say, is that this is the one time when I've looked across all of the bits of magic that have appeared in A Song of Ice and Fire that it just doesn't seem to fit, because there is no specific sacrifice that is made in order for this to happen. And Thoros of Myr doesn't seem to be wanting to do this. I have been looking for solutions. The solution that I come up with, which is probably the best I am going to come up with, is actually very close to what you just said, is that in terms of sacrifice, there were a lot of deaths just before that. One could argue that they were sacrificed. I don't think it quite works for me, because they weren't sacrificed in order to perform the magic, but maybe that's too limited a view on how magic works. And if Thoros was performing a ritual and he was therefore doing the things he needed to do, even if he didn't believe that he was attempting to do something, he was doing something that somebody who did believe it did originally and create in order to create that effect. If that logic flows, then the intentionality is there as well. So I still have misgivings about that. I still think it feels like an outlier, but given it does seem to be just the only outlier, I can say, okay, the rules that I have in my mind about intentionality, about sacrifice, if I just make them a little bit hazy and a little bit wiggly lined, then yeah, okay, I'll allow it. So have you convinced me? I don't think convinced is the right word, but I'm happy to accept that as probably me overthinking things and George R. R. Martin just writing something that works for him for the story. Sebastian Holden, does the sacrifice of the very young create more potent magic results? Does the person's innocence matter? Adults do not seem to work as well. So this comes with the idea of the sacrifice, and the greater the sacrifice seems to be able to produce greater magic. So this is where the king's blood idea comes in, is that a king is clearly very important. Therefore, a king being sacrificed, or a king's blood that is able to create very potent magic. Now, are the young more potent in terms of magical effect? Well, yes, probably a greater sacrifice than a very old person, one perhaps could argue. But it's not the, we hear about king's blood, we hear about sacrificing great or holy people, but and young people, I guess so. Yes, I think is the short answer. It's not ever explicitly said, but yes, it's about the importance that is placed upon the sacrifice, which means that implicitly children would probably be higher. Cloaked One picking up for Tony Sled, saying, do you consider what the faceless men do is magic? Yes, I did have a question. I will combine this. I'm sure I'll come across this in a moment. One of my patrons asked a very similar question, but is what the faceless men do magic? Yes, although I should probably clarify that what the kindly man, who is Aya's mentor really within the faceless men, says is that there are 3 tiers of what they do in terms of hiding their appearance. The bottom tier is just mummer's tricks. There are a certain number of things that you can do just to disguise your appearance. You can put on a physical disguise, you can change your voice, you can change how you sit or walk, these kinds of things. This is the kind of thing that Varys does in King's Landing. He takes on different characters and personas. These are Mummer's tricks. This isn't magic. He's just a good actor and has good props. And so that is the first level of what the Faceless Men do. That's not magic. That's just being an actor. The second level is sorcery around glamours. They do use this. It's just a throwaway line from the kindly man, but it's clear that they do use this. They to make themselves appear different. That's the second level. But they say that both of those things, you can see through those. People, I mean, most of the time they don't, but there are clever, talented people who can see through both of those. The third layer is the layer of actually physically changing who you are, and that is the bit that, yes, is magical. So what they do is when people die in the House of Black and White, they go through this ceremonial magical process of they cut, we saw this on the TV show, they cut the face off, and then that gets dried and cured effectively. And when it gets put on Arya, so they cut her face, so her blood is there running over her face, and then they put the other face on her, and she gets this short moment when she feels and experiences the life of this other person, or what appears to be, it's not 100% clear, but what appears to be perhaps the last memory or a very strong memory of this person. And then the face is fixed, and then she becomes that other person. That is magic. They are doing a magical thing. They have learnt something. Again, this is about the Kaiban's idea of something lingers. And what lingers, the Faceless Men have figured out a way of using this face to capture the essence of the person. It is still there. Arya feels this other person, and then you become shaped like that other person. So yes, it is magic. A question from Tam Hutchins saying, I want to thank everyone in the chat for their kindness, concern, and lovely well wishes. I'm not surprised Robert has such amazing people in his chat. Well, I do have amazing people in my chat. I don't know why they were. I miss a lot in the chat when I'm doing these live streams, because obviously I'm talking a lot. But you have my kindness, concern, and well wishes as well. So I hope all is well with you. Tony Sled saying, great chat, great folk. Thanks in Deep Geek for the thoughtful response. Also, the Faceless Men could get their power from having access to people dying. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I didn't go to that next level, but I think you are completely on the button. This is people who are sacrificing themselves. And so this is where the magical power comes from. They are sacrificing themselves and giving themselves over to the Faceless Men. They know that's what's happening, and that is where the power, as you say, comes from for their magic. 26 Art Girl saying, I have not heard of anyone doing a video about the cave systems and water systems throughout Westeros. Do you think they play a part in the magic? Yes, but I think that, so the cave systems, this is something I came back to again and again when I was doing my traveler's guide through Westeros, is that the more you investigate Westeros, the more you discover that there's as much going on underground as there is overground. There are these cave systems and underground routes everywhere. Just at the north, you get there are routes under the cave systems under the wall. The Castle Black has these runways underground. When it's winter above ground, then they operate underground most of the time. Mole Town is called Mole Town because that it is mostly underground. They're like moles. They live underground. You get these huge caverns and cave systems in the Westerlands. You get them in Cracklaw Point. You get them all over the place. You get, obviously, Winterfell. Underneath Winterfell, you get the crypts. And through Winterfell's walls, you get what look like these tunnels that feel like they're veins, roots, perhaps from the weirwood tree. So underneath Westeros, there are these cave systems and roots and everything moving all over the place. This is part of the magic, because this is part of the natural magic, and increasingly I think of the weirwood network as being Westeros. It is, if you think, as most of us do, that the weirwood network is all connected, and they're connected just in Westeros, then that is because the root network goes over everywhere and does embrace the continent as a whole. So the weirwood network is symbolically Westeros, and therefore the magic that's there is as much about what's happening underneath the ground as what's happening overground. Dan McKay saying, I think I recall an elf in Tolkien's world being asked by a hobbit if an object was magical, and the elf replying something like, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean. It was made by the elves, if that's what you mean. I like the idea that magic does not seem anything special to the race or species that originated it. Yes, absolutely. And this is, I think, sort of perhaps wrapping up this kind of natural world idea of magic. I think you're thinking about Sam and Galadriel there. And Sam sort of says, wow, this is so magical. And Galadriel says, well, I don't know really what you mean by magical. This is just what we do. And so this is just normal for elves. That's a hashtag there. Hashtag normal for elves. And that is the feel that we have here with the natural magic of Westeros, is that this is just how the world is. And to us, it looks magical. And to people who do not understand it, or who do not come from Westeros, it looks magical. But actually, to the children of the forest, this is just the way the world is. This is just how it operates. Lady Dane, my question seems simple, but I don't think it is. Does magic have to be consistent in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire? Isn't our own history of scientific discovery proof that some people know some of the magic some of the time? Consistency really involves a theory of the universe as a whole. We don't really know ours, so why should we be able to understand it in the books? Yeah, good point. I think that I like the fuzzy edges. I think that and I've been looking at this idea of magic and trying to come up with a grand unifying theme of magic, or theory of magic in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire for a long time. And I haven't got there. All I've got is to this list of principles. We know sacrifice, we know intentionality. Someone, I forget who, one of my patrons, also talked about genealogy. Magic does seem to pass down through generations. There are also some other principles. The principles of the level of magic. Big magic allows other magic, so amplifies other magic. There's a principle that we haven't touched on at all as well, which is this idea, common across many fantasy systems, is that magic originates from above. We have the red comet heralding magic. So there are some of these principles, but that does not mean that we have an all-encompassing structure of how magic works, because it works in slightly different ways. And if we to understand it all, and if we were to be able to categorize it all, it would not be magic, it would just be how the world works. So I am happy with the fuzzy edges. I'm happy that we don't have this all-encompassing theory on how magic operates. Otherwise, it will be a very boring world. Kendra Summers, what are your thoughts on the use of glamour? The significance of gemstones, such as the ruby worn by Melisandre, as well as the ones she gave Mance, posing as Rattleshirt. Also, the potential glamour of Maynard Plum with his moonstone brooch. and then you quote, this is from Duncan Egg. This close, there was something queer about the cast of Sir Maynard's features. The longer Dunk looked, the less he seemed to see. So that, on that specific thing, Maynard Plum was Bloodraven. I'm not the first to think this. I'm sure I won't be the last. There's plenty of evidence there that Bloodraven glamoured himself to look or take on the appearance of Maynard Plum so that he could be there in the Mystery Night to be figuring out what is happening and to be able to spring his trap on this, what was the Second Blackfire Rebellion, before it even started. So yes, he used glamour magic. My thoughts on it, in terms of sort of the technicalities, it seems to me that you glamour the jewel that will allow you to then take on an appearance. So it doesn't require an ongoing bit of magic. It requires a bit of magic to start with. So this is where your sacrifice has to come in. We don't know where these sacrifices have come in. These, we just see the results of it later. But you do your magic, which then creates a lasting effect with Melisandre, with Maynard Plum, and so on. The idea that that Dunk could sort of see through some of this glamour is fascinating, because Dunk seems almost the least magical character you can imagine. And yet this perhaps helps him. You compare and contrast with Cyril Farrell, who is all about seeing what is the truth of the situation. He's the kind of person who I suspect the kindly man was talking about, that you can see through some glamours. Now, this doesn't mean I think that Bloodraven is bad at doing glamours. I think that Dunk is just this kind of so centered, so honest, so himself, that he doesn't see mistruths. He just sees the honesty and truth of something. That, I think, is why he could see not through the glamour, but he didn't even know what was going on. He just, okay, that doesn't quite work out. I don't understand what's happening there. That, I think, is why. And I've got an emerging theory, I've mentioned this a few times there, about Dunk being not magical, but a sort of a load or a catalyst for magic in some way. Around him things happen, and he is the non-magical center point around which magical things gravitate. Couple more questions, I think, in the chat. Yul Elson, thank you very much for the super sticker saying KO, I think. Mara Lee, again, Mara, thank you. This is very generous of you. Saying, will we see any more uses for the Shade of the Evening Trees beside the drink that the Warlocks used in the House of the Undying and what Euron confiscated to use in his practice? I think we're done with that now. So the Shade of the Evening Tree is in Karth. Karth will probably have just one more role and purpose in this story. That is to oppose Daenerys in Meereen. The big ancient cities over in Essos that rely on slavery, Karth and Volantis and so on, will be trying to take on Dany, and Dany will do away with them. Whether she actually actively goes back to Karth and burns it, I don't know. But Karth is bringing a fleet to attack Meereen. So that is the main thing we're going to have from Karth. That the House of the Undying collapsed when Dany left. We didn't see what happened to the Shade of Evening Trees themselves, but Piat Pri and the others went off hunting for her with some of their Shade of the Evening juice in a barrel, and that got captured by Euron. So I think they've now served their purpose, basically. No one's going back to the House of the Undying. The warlocks themselves that left and escaped have been captured by Euron, and the Shade of the Evening wine, or whatever you wish to call it, that is in Euron's possession. So I think that is their role. Vixtable saying, being that Bran has the greatest magical potential in the story, do you think his level of green seer ability is disconnected from the dragons, or is it just because the dragons are back that he is so strong? I think they're disconnected. I think that he is connected in with this kind of natural magic of Westeros, and that is nothing to do with the dragons. I don't think that there's a link between them really in the slightest. The dragons are not of Westeros. The dragons originally, yes, there was a time when dragons were roaming over Westeros, but the dragons originally came from the far east, as far as we're aware. So I think that they are different. Swagger Dagger saying Dunk is an enigma in Deep Geek. Yes, I would agree with that. Absolutely. And Paige Joy saying, hi, Robert. What are your thoughts regarding the more accepting attitude in Essos towards magic in comparison to the more skeptical attitude we find the Maesters in Westeros? Well, it's noticeable. Now, this is... okay. To map it out first, in the Essos, there are some places that are just very magical. We already think about Ashai, Qohor, I've name checked as well. You get some places where magic is accepted just as part of life, like Karth, for example. The further west you go, the lesser part of life it is. Places like Braavos and Pentos, it's not, and the areas around the disputed lands, yes, there is magic, but it's not as big a part of life. What happens in Westeros with the Maesters is a power play. This is them proactively trying to push it down. Now, the way that they do that is by being the most powerful organization in Westeros. You get these mutterings from people like Marwyn and from people like Barbary Dustin. They're right. The Maesters are hugely powerful. There is a Maester advising every single ruling person in the entire country, in the entire continent. The Maesters are in charge of the communications network. The Maesters are in charge of announcing the beginning and ending of seasons. So the entirety of the agricultural industry is dependent on their word as well. They are the people who are in charge of teaching and training each new generation of noble lords. They're the ones who heal. They're the ones who understand all of the science and technology. They are in charge of so much. They are so powerful. And that is why magic and belief in magic has been dampened down in Westeros, because they do not want it there. Now, the Maesters have not extended out beyond Westeros. It's noticeable that you may get a couple of random ex-Maesters who are hanging around in Essos, but you don't get people having their Maester over in Essos in the same way you do in Westeros. So that is the big difference. And it is very much this same kind of feel. George R. R. Martin has name-checked it as the monks and the Catholic Church within medieval Europe. They were the ones who could read. They were the ones who possessed the books. They were the ones who understood the mysteries of the world, and no one else was allowed to. Goose Mulder saying, do you think there is no magic system, or that George keeps it secret to not spoil the end of the books? I think that he keeps it deliberately fuzzy because it aids him in the way that he likes to write, which is that it is never 100% clear who or what is responsible for things, because everything in this world is written from a subjective point of view. Every bit that we know about this world and the story is written from somebody's subjective point of view. There is no an attempt at objectivity here at all. The main story is written from different people's perspectives. Dunk and Egg is written from Dunk's perspective. The history books, the Fire and Blood, the World of Ice and Fire, written by maesters from their perspective. We do not get an overall objective truth to any of this, so we will never get a clear understanding of how magic works, because we are never going to have any clear explanation given to us for any of these things that is not filtered through somebody who is trying to give us their agenda. The closest we could ever have come is things like the World of Ice and Fire, but that is done from the Maester's perspective, and this is always in Fire and Blood again and again and again. Whenever magic came up, particularly whenever women and magic came up, they are witches, they are doing dark magic. It's always being done down. There's never, and anyone who ever did any attempt to categorize things, to understand them, people like Sept and Bath, they are frowned upon and their books are got rid of and burned because they're not allowed in the Maester's worldview. Chaos Ballerina saying, what exactly is shadow binding? How does it work? We don't know the details. We've never been to a shy, so we haven't got the details. We can only see what we see of it, and it appears to be using shadows in order to produce a magical effect, in the same way that fire magic uses fire in order to create a magical effect. So a shadow baby is you use the shadows to create a physical form to do a deed for you. That is what it was, and it's based on, if it's learned from a shy, it's because a shy is a city of shadows. The sun does not shine directly there. So what is it? It is a type of magic, and it is a magic that uses darkness and shadows in order to achieve an effect, in the same way that some use water or fire. Reflective rambling. On this theme, history downplays the church's contribution to scientific development. If that's partially for power, would the Faith and Citadel explore, appropriate magic under a different name? Yes, quite possibly. I think that they tread a very fine path, because someone like Qyburn was doing scientific discovery, and he was doing exactly the kind of thing that you're suggesting here. He was taking things that could be seen as magical and saying, okay, here's a scientific explanation for it. It's simply that he was going into areas that the Maesters did not want him to be going into. But he is exactly the kind of thing that the Maesters would be exactly the kind of thing that they'd be wanting to do. It's noticeable that you get the seasons, as an example here, the seasons are out of balance. They're moving about all over the place. But the Maesters have attempted to at least give the impression of being able to turn this into some sort of a science only they can understand, and only they can say when the seasons have changed. This isn't how other people talk about up at the wall. Then people talk about spirit summer and say this means that we're coming towards the end of the summer because it's got very warm and now it's going to get very cold afterwards. And Old Nan has ways of working out these kinds of things. The people have ways of understanding how things are changing, but the maesters have claimed the seasons are changing, but the maesters have claimed the high ground, saying we get to decide and we get to say when it's happening because we have got the science. So that's the way that they are doing it, is that they are saying we have the knowledge, and therefore it's it's subtle, but are they going to appropriate magic? I think if they can, they'll just get rid of it. They'll just say it doesn't exist, and push it to one side. Jacob Peach, thank you very much for the super chat. I didn't see a question attached to that. If there is one, do drop it into the chat and I'll make sure one of the moderators picks up on it. Question from Mara Lee saying, compare and contrast in general magic and magic users in A Song of Ice and Fire with other fantasy literature like The Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. I've talked about The Lord of the Rings a lot. The Harry Potter series I did want to quickly touch on, because this is different to the way that magic is handled is different to most other fantasy series, in that there isn't this cost. You learn how to do magic. You wave your wand, you say your magic word, and magic happens. And there's no huge cost at all attached to that. So what has happened there is that the society has adapted, the magical society has adapted very strong rules on what you can and cannot do. Because magic is effectively, once you've learned the tricks, you can do anything. Society has said, no, but these are the laws of things you can't do. You cannot do magic in front of the muggles, and so on. These are the forbidden curses. I can't remember what they were called. There were certain spells you weren't allowed to do. So that was how you get around that. And that, I think, and this is true for some other types of children's fantasy literature, is that because you do not wish to take away the fun and enjoyment and magic of magic being in this story, you do not want to immediately get bogged down into all the rules and regulations and this is how this might work and that's what you have to do in order to pay for that. Magic just happens, but society around the magic has created a system to prevent its usage to unbalance the world. Questions from Jack Jackson 3. Again, I didn't see a question attached. So Jack Jackson. Oh, there's a question above saying, Kinvara, who is she? I think she is superior physically to Melisandre. What is the story with these priestesses? So this is effectively a show thing. In the books we get the high priest Benaro, who is the main man over in Volantis, and yes, he certainly seems to be very powerful. We see him briefly when Tyrion sees him in Volantis, and there's like fire and sparks and flaming glyphs and all kinds of things going on just when he's preaching a sermon. So yes, he does seem more powerful. The thing we have to remember about Melisandre is a rogue priest. Melisandre is going against what the main faith of R'hllor are wanting and believing. She believes the same fundamentals about this, great apocalyptic battle between her god and the great other. She believes all of that, but she was not sent. Thoros of Myr was sent to Westeros. She went of her own volition, hunting down what she thought was Azor Ahai Reborn found Stannis. Her belief that Stannis is Azor Ahai Reborn is against the belief of the main church, who think it is Dany. And this is important because they are now going to throw their weight behind Dany. So when she heads off to Westeros, it is not just with a few well wishes. She has got the entire weight of the largest religion in Essos behind her. Vixtable saying, I guess I always thought that the reason the dragons returned was because the three-eyed raven was pulling the strings and preparing for the White Walkers. Yeah, it's an interesting one. The dragons returned because Dany performed the magic needed for the dragons to return. George R. R. Martin has said what happened when the three dragon eggs were hatched was this unique confluence of all of the magical right things happening at the magical right time. You get these huge sacrificial deaths happening. We get Mary Maz-Dur, we get Khal Drogo, we get Rhaego, this great child of prophecy, all dying at the same time. We get a fire going. We get Dany, who is suddenly finally believing what is going on. There is a blink and you miss it a little bit earlier. Viserys bled on, we get his blood on one of the dragon eggs, so you get King's blood falling on there, you get the comet in the sky. Everything just comes in to one perfect moment, and that's what caused the dragon eggs to hatch. Bloodraven's plans are just about Westeros. That is what he is about. I think that you can make a case, an interesting case, for what happened at Summerhall. I did a video all about that. If you're interested, that was absolutely fascinating, and the potential link across to Bloodraven is there, but not the hatching of the dragons, I don't think. Connor Gormley saying, hi Robert, love your work and been watching you for years, and about time I donated. Well, thank you so much. I will always provide these absolutely free and available for everyone. I was wondering if magic will survive the story or will die out again. Yes, so I think I've got a question from my patrons as well. My take is that with the death of dragons and the end of the others and falling of the wall, the magical ambience, which I've talked about before, in the world will drop significantly. That does not then mean, and maybe not all of the dragons will die, maybe Drogon will survive like he did in the show. Magic is not just going to disappear from this world. The magic of Westeros, the old magic, the magic of the weirwood trees, that's going to survive almost certainly. So that level of magic will still be there. Green seers will still theoretically exist. The inheritance of skin changers will still carry on from generation to generation. So the fact that this is a magical world will still be real. People will still be able to perform magic, but the kinds of things that only recently came back, the pyromancers being incredibly powerful, the glass candles working, that kind of thing will go when all of these big magic effects all blink out in A Dream of Spring. They won't all completely disappear, I suspect, but the ambient level of magic will drop down. Question from Reflective Rambling, picking one up for Austin Flowers. Thank you so much. Could a shadow be bound to a body in place of a soul or spirit? Could someone be an unknowing or unwilling shadow agent? I think this is one of these ones where I just have to do that too. Slight shrugs these. We don't know much about shadow binding, is the honest answer. And I like the sound of what you're saying there. That sounds great. I can't see anything that says that that can't happen, but we know so little about shadow binding. My sort of feel is, in terms of, could a shadow be bound to a body in place of a soul or spirit? Could someone be an unknowing or unwilling shadow agent? I mean, I could certainly see a shadow white idea, that you could have a body animated by a shadow within it. That could certainly work. Whether somebody could be an unwilling shadow agent by bringing a shadow around with them. Yeah, I mean, it's quite a spooky dooky idea. I don't know if this is what you're intending, but the idea that you could be going around and your shadow is hiding another shadow that somebody has summoned forth in some way. Yeah, why not? I don't think we can say yes or no definitively on any of that, but yeah, it sounds great. Mara Lee saying, for Jack Jackson 3, who is Kinvara? Is she more powerful than Melisandre? What is up with these two priestesses, their roles in the series, especially in the last two books? Yeah, so I answered that one a moment ago. Apologies, that's probably a matter of the lag there. So yes, I answered that one already. Jason, hello, Robert. My question is about Valyrian steel. What type of magic the Valyrians used to craft this, if any? My biggest assumption is that it was just something to do with the dragon's fire, but maybe there is some form of magic involved, which is also blood magic, perhaps. Also, please say googly woogly. Okay, so what magic? We know it involved spells, or at least the reforging of magic involved spells. Reforging of Valyrian steel involves spells. What created it? We don't know. The best guess that I have is that it perhaps involves dragon glass, partly because if Valyrian steel is effective against the others, you have to ask why dragon glass is, and perhaps dragon glass is folded into, if it has these magical properties, folded into the steel in some way. That explains why Valyrian steel often has a sort of a rippled effect to it in terms of the coloration, and also has different colors. And dragon glass does come in different colors, not just black, but also purples and greens and blues and lots of others. And this would explain how they get to have different colored blades, which they do with Valyrian steel. So what is the magic involved? Valyrian magic, Targaryen magic, all seems to be about fire and blood. So my guess is that the ingredients are something to do with learned spells, possibly / probably dragon glass, possibly / probably dragon fire, and then just some very, very skilled blacksmithery. That seems to be what it is. The magic, the secret has been lost, and boring answer is that George R. R. Martin almost certainly is never going to tell us exactly what it is. Write down, these are the ingredients that you need, but that seems to be the hint. Sam comes up with this idea of dragon steel, which seems to be what Valyrian steel is, which again has the link across to dragons. So this is where the dragon fire possibly comes from. But beyond that, we don't know. Andrew Kay saying, ice, the sword ice being melted down, he seemed to notice black and red liquid components. The black could be evidence that your dragon glass and Valyrian steel is correct. Well, yeah, thank you. I hadn't picked up on that. Hopefully I'll pick up on that in my next read or listen through. So the black and the red, you can get red dragon glass too, and indeed this is something that Tobbe Mott tries to put into it. So that is him putting red. Red wasn't there to start with, and he tried to put red into it when reforging it. Londoc20 saying, hello, Robert. When Theon sees Bran's face in the Heart Tree in Winterfell, do you think this is actual magic being done by Bran, or is it just Theon imagining he sees him? Theon is a broken man at this point, so it's hard for me to believe everything he sees or hears. What do you say? Yes, so we get Theon in Winterfell towards the end of the story, as we have it so far. He does a lot of wandering around and being weak, being a broken man, but partly starting to come towards reclaiming who he is. And one of the times he goes into the Godswood and he thinks he hears someone calling out his name, and he turns around and says, who said that? And another time he is walking there and he hears the word Bran, and then he looks at the weirwood tree and he thinks he can see Bran's features there just for a moment. Now, what my take is, we have to understand Bran is connected in with this weirwood tree at Winterfell. He's gone through time, seeing lots of different things. This is his last chapter. This is what he was doing, seeing through the Winterfell tree. And we are pretty sure you can speak out through it. He called out to his father, and his father turned, and who's there? So this almost certainly is him calling out to Theon if he sees Theon. That's what he did when he saw his father. When he sees Theon, he will call out to him. What this reads to me is like one Bran there in one sitting, but Theon coming at two different moments of time, and Bran interacting with him at both of those moments of time at the same point. What I mean is, Bran has this, we would see this from Bran's perspective. Going through the weirwood tree, he sees Theon. Theon comes in there and he says, Theon! And Theon says, who's that? Then Bran shifts to a different moment in time and he sees Theon again and says, Bran! It's me, Bran! And then Theon looks and he can see Bran's features in the weirwood tree. That seems to be what's going on from my perspective, as best as I can understand it. Can we believe everything that Theon's seeing and thinking and doing? No, we can't. I don't go down. I know some people have gone down the route that everything that he's seeing, or large amounts of what he's seeing, is just him making stuff up, his mind playing tricks on him. I don't quite go down that route. I could certainly imagine that his brain is not as it should be. And if he hears Bran and thinks it's Bran's voice and someone says Bran, he looks at the weirwood tree and for a moment he might indeed think he sees Bran's face there. That works for me. Whether it actually is Bran's face or it's just that's a face, and he's thinking of Bran, so that's what he sees, I don't think it makes huge amounts of difference. So my take is that this is Bran having conversations with Theon. He's at one point in time, but Theon is at more than one point in time. And we know that Bran is going to do this. He's going to interact with people at different points in time. He's going to do it with Hodor, interacting with him at different points in time. And this is just going to be a little bit of foreshadowing of that. Targaryen Time Lord saying, hello, Robert. Just a real quick query this time round. Do you think magic as a force in the story will survive the ending, or will it fade from the world once and for all? This was the question. Targaryen Time Lord, I hope you heard me saying it a little bit earlier. I replied to somebody else there. With that question, so I hope that worked for you. Zachalok saying, hi Robert, what can you tell about the Faceless Men? Are they using magic? Again, this is another question I think I've answered a little bit earlier. Zachalok, I hope that's okay. Somebody asked that in the chat. You did ask whether I thought George R. R. Martin got inspired by the face dancers in June, who are creatures who can change their facial features to look like various people. Possibly is the answer. That this is a theme throughout a lot of fantasy literature, going all the way back to Greek myths and even earlier, with people being able to change their features. So I don't think he necessarily took that from Dune, but yeah, he certainly will have read Dune, and he will be a fan. Catherine Fursith saying, actually, I'm down to, we're making good time today, people. Just the 3 hours so far. A couple more questions from my patrons. So now is a good time to drop any more questions into the chat if you've got them. Catherine Fursith saying, which magic in A Song of Ice and Fire do you think is least understood or most ignored? Is there some magic that is performed under people's noses that is regularly not seen as magic? Now, this is a point where I'm sort of picking up on a couple of things I've said earlier. I think people watching is what I would say at this moment. This is the thing that we have been unaware of all the way through, and people watching what's happening elsewhere in a number of different ways. Bran watching Theon is there. Bloodraven watching what has been going on through the eyes of Mormont's Raven. Ghost, he has been watching, he's been guiding things. And also the glass candles. It starts to get a little bit creepy is probably the best word for it when you go through and think about what's been going on. So Sam arrives in Old Town. Within a couple of hours, he's been sort of grabbed and taken up to Marwyn's quarters, and then he said, how did you know I was coming? And they pointed at the glass candle, and it's like, we've been watching you all this way. All that time that he'd been traveling all the way down, they've been keeping an eye on him. That is, as I say, it's quite creepy, but this is happening all over the place in this story. People are seeing what is happening and keeping a track of it. Quaithe is keeping a track of Dany. Bloodraven is keeping a track on Jon. Marwyn is just keeping an eye on what's going on around. Leighton Hightower is very probably doing something quite similar. Euron is almost certainly, I think, skin changing into people and seeing what's happening through their eyes. This is happening in lots of different places, and yet we don't acknowledge it. And this will become more evident over the course of the next book, because suddenly we're going to see Bran's perspective of when he's spying on people, which is what he's doing. We're going to see maybe Sam using a glass candle, spying on people. Then suddenly our knowledge of what's happening, and this will shift the book, because I talked a bit ago about the fact that everything we're being told is from one person's point of view. It will carry on from different people's point of view, but it's always a subjective perspective. That will carry on. But the information a person has is not limited to just wherever they happen to be. Suddenly they can understand things that are happening much, much further afield. And that will hugely shift the dynamic of this book. Because, and I'm not saying this is going to be involved in the downfall of Littlefinger, but just imagine if you could see what Littlefinger has been doing behind the scenes. That would change things hugely. He's been getting away with a whole load of stuff. If Bran has been keeping an eye on him and seeing what he's been doing, that suddenly changes the dynamic completely. Shetland Apache saying, magic usually comes at a cost. What is the cost for skin changes? They often seem to be loners with no real friends. Do they sacrifice humanity? Yes, to a degree. If you walk into your animal and stay in your animal, then you lose yourself in that animal over a longer period of time. But more fundamentally, this is what I say, this is a difference between the intentional magic and this is just the way the world works. Skin changing is just the way the world works. Some people can skin change into birds or wolves or whatever it is. This does not operate on the same rules as being this kind of intentional, I'm going to do a magic spell thing. This is just how the world works for them. This is not, we call it magic because it looks like magic to us, because we can't imagine how that would operate. It doesn't operate on normal scientific rules that we understand, therefore it is magic. But it does work on their normal rules for that world, and so that is just normal. So that is why there is no immediate sacrifice that has to happen, or indeed intentionality. Gavin saying, hi Robert, apologies for another off-topic question, but since you were asked if you played any Lord of the Rings games, I was curious if you have heard of or played the Lord of the Rings online. I have absolutely adored the game for its deeper dive into the cultures and lands of Middle-earth, only briefly touched on in the books. Also, your Battle of the Five Armies video was brilliant. Thank you. And I would love to see Lord of the Rings streams soon, since it keeps coming up in your A Song of Ice and Fire streams. Yes, so on that, I have heard of the Lord of the Rings online. I've never played it, but I do hear good things. In terms of the Lord of the Rings live stream, I will do one. I was going to say next month. I keep on forgetting we're into July. I will do one later this month, just to see how we go, see whether people enjoy that, appreciate that. If people do, the idea is that we will do, I don't know, one a month, maybe a bit more of Lord of the Rings, balance it with the A Song of Ice and Fire content as well. Next week, I should say right now, next week is my birthday week next week, and I'm going to go and try and have some fun. So I won't do one next week. I know I've missed a few this year. I've missed more than I had hoped to, but we'll be back up and running all the way through the second half of the year, regular weekly Thursdays. But next week, I'm just going to take the week off just to have a little bit of fun. Question from Chaos Ballerina for Toby Hutterwatt. Thank you so much for picking up for somebody else. What are your thoughts on how the Hammer of the Waters fell in the neck, with the usual cost for magic being blood? So we're told when the Children of the Forest performed their Hammer of the Waters magic, this had they sacrificed hundreds, thousands of their own, as well as humans, I guess. So this was with blood sacrifice, and that's what called forth the Hammer of the Waters. It was, horrendous. That one can understand why they did it, but it was a lot of blood sacrifice. The weirwood trees rely on blood sacrifice. Jamie McKenna saying, thank you for another wonderful day in school, Sir Robert. We'll have to catch up on rewatch, but wishing you and Dan a peaceful evening and an enjoyable weekend. Thank you very much. And I think I had another one. Marilee saying, just a show of appreciation for all the fabulous content and stories on both your channels and on Patreon. Please say aluminium. Happy to. Thank you. And I think, I think one thing I will happily do now is, if you are watching this live, could you please just give a big thank you to the moderators who again been doing a fantastic job today. I do have the best community and the best moderators known to humanity, I would argue. So please do show them a little bit of love in the chat. I will have some quickly go through the chat, see what other questions I can quickly answer. Chaos Ballerina, what do you make of the Heart of Winter? Unlike the show where you kill the leader and they all topple, perhaps that could be a key talisman to deal with the others. Perhaps the Heart of Winter is... I mean, it doesn't have to be a thing. It could just be where the others were. It's mentioned just the once. It's mentioned when Bran is being shown by Bloodraven why he has to live, why he has to learn magic. And he shows him, and Bran was horrified, and he said, now you know why you must. And probably just showed him lots of others. So that's probably all it is. Maybe there is something up there that can do it. Matthew Dominique saying happy name day. Thank you very much. I will try my very best to have a good week. Chaos Ballerina Cat actually comments on how cold resistant Starks are. Ned slept in Winterfell naked. Yeah, Winterfell was warmed. It has to be said. It had boiling hot springs, and the water from them was pumped around inside the walls of Winterfell Castle, and so the rooms they had there were warm, and it was only what Cat often didn't like was the window being open. The room itself, if you kept everything closed, the room itself stayed quite warm, but the Starks, Ned, quite liked having the window open. So yes, they seem to have, I mean, cold resistance is probably too strong a way of saying it, but they're more used to cold than others, perhaps just because they lived in the cold all that time. Andrew Cage is saying Hand of the Water supposedly required a huge sacrifice, many captives or possibly even some of their own. Yes, absolutely. Ryan Larkin, thank you so much for the super sticker with a mug of tea. Excellent. Lyle Hammock saying, could you compare and contrast skin changes in Lord of the Rings, specifically Beorn, with those in it says Adolf here. I think you mean Song of Ice and Fire. Thank you and happy birthday. Well, thank you. In terms of Beorn, this is and I need to do more study. I was going to do a video about Beorn actually, so I need to do a bit more study on this. But this is natural for both. So skin changes and Beorn, it's natural. But Beorn changes into a bear, which is different to skin changes who they project themselves, or their spirit, soul, whatever, goes into say bear. So that's the key difference between them, is that Beorn, as you see him in The Hobbit at the end of the Battle of the Five Armies, he comes as a massive bear. He has transformed himself into being a bear. That wouldn't be with, say, Jon as a skin changer. He does not transform himself into a massive wolf. He merely would put himself into ghost. So that's the big difference. Brett Munger saying, thank you, Robert, for supplying the best videos to help me fall asleep. Middle-earth is truly amazing. Middle-earth is truly amazing. Thank you so much. And I think with that, I will start to pull this one to a close. If you are interested in supporting this channel in helping me produce more videos like the ones I do on Middle-earth and the ones I do on A Song of Ice and Fire, there will be a link appearing somewhere around here. If you no, actually that's somewhere here. Anyway, here and here will be links to exciting things. Click on one of these links. It's great. Thank you so much. I will be back in 2 weeks' time. We will probably have one more Song of Ice and Fire video live stream, and then I will get on and do a Lord of the Rings live stream. So Lord of the Rings live stream in 3 weeks' time. Okay, everyone, take care, and I will see you again soon.